No. I don't. Oh, I am. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to call the December 17th Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting to order. This meeting is being held in person as well as on Zoom. And people can join via audio 719-359-4580. Okay, let's start with the roll call.
Commissioner Houghton.
Present.
Commissioner Cowan.
Here.
Chair Waller.
Here.
Commissioner Guyman. Here. Commissioner Sipperly. Here. Commissioner Connerton. Here. We have quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll just welcome Commissioner Godman. This is the new commissioner of this meeting. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, receipt of the minutes. Were there any?
Minutes are not available at this time. They'll get to you next meeting.
Okay. Okay, do we have any conflicts of interest tonight from any of the commissioners for the agenda items that we have? Okay. Seeing none, comments from citizens appearing for items not on the agenda. Okay, we'll take the first agenda item, which is a public hearing for planning file 34-24 preliminary plat 619 Overland Drive and planning file 36-24, which is residential minor site and architectural plan. And P and Z is a recommendation for council only on this item. This item will go to council. Okay, Emery.
Okay, Emery Ellingson, Community Development, and I will be sharing my screen for a presentation. Okay, so the item before you tonight, technically it is two separate applications considered for one property. It's for a preliminary plat, which is a subdivision action. So splitting the land up, and then a residential minor site and architectural plan, which is for development. And so presentation is going to talk about both items. They are separate applications and they both go to city council for final approval. So planning and zoning commission's role tonight is on a recommendation for approval or denial. So just quick overview of preliminary plat. So that's subdividing land. And so it doesn't necessarily have to come with development, but it's dividing one parcel into multiple. And so as seen in the packet, this proposal is for 11 townhome lots. And then, so that's the preliminary plat application. And then the other application is the residential minor site and architectural plan. And so that's for development, and that comes with all the drawings for architecturals, landscape, what an actual development would look like. So not just dividing the land. So just to give you an idea of how this all works in the process. So tonight, Planning and Zoning Commission will review the preliminary plat and the residential minor site and architectural plan. That goes on to council. If council approves it, then it goes to final plans, which would be 100% construction drawings, then to building permit, then to construction, and then to close everything out is a final plat. And so that's a final plat of where everything has been constructed, where everything is on site. So that always follows a preliminary plat. So to get started, subject property for this application is 619 Overland Drive. So marked there by the star in the Overland Drive neighborhood, just west of downtown. So this is the existing location. There are two structures on the property, each having 2 residential units. So there's a total of 4 units on site. Photos above, there's the structure more towards the rear of the property in the upper photo, and then the one to the west of the property is in the bottom. And so that's existing conditions. So just a little bit more information. The property is zoned residential high-density zoning district. The lot is 25,613 feet. And then surrounding land uses are all residential. And then to the north is railroad right-of-way. So again, for this particular application, you have one action item, and that's to consider recommendation. And staff recommends a recommendation for approval. And then again, planning and zoning commission actions tonight would be approve recommendation for approval, approve recommendation approval with additional conditions, recommend for denial, or continue item to next regularly scheduled meeting. So those are the actions. So again, existing site, 2 structures on the property. So that is how it exists today. And this is the proposed preliminary plat. And so this does have some of the site layout, and then it will show the locations of each individual lot. These are intended to be townhomes. So each basically footprint of a building would be a lot to itself. So the owner would not just own the unit, but also the land underneath, as opposed to a condominium. So just a little background. Anytime you have a subdivision that creates 4 or more lots, the preliminary plat process is required. And so that's why that part of the application is here tonight. So there are criteria for preliminary plats as listed below. Staff found that the application for the plat met all of the criteria. So some of these they do overlap with the criteria for the minor site plan, that it consistent with comprehensive plan, compliance with the zoning district standards, use dimensional design, layout of streets. The point is finding that the proposed lots meets code, which staff found it did. For these particular items, 5 provides evidence of public water and sewer system connections. So this is an infill site. There's existing utility connections in the street for water, sewer, electric, so it can be served by utilities. Identifies and adequately mitigates known hazard areas. So the site does not contain any areas of natural hazard. There is some areas that are identified as what's called flood zone B. And that is it's not a special flood hazard zone, and owners would not have to have flood insurance. But it just has to do with the way everything is mapped, but it's not a hazard zone. And then this project is not phased. So that number 7 is not applicable. Reviewing agencies, public works, and engineering departments had some comments for the applicant to provide additional details that would come on that final plat. You think of like a rough draft, final draft following construction. As far as public comment, I will get to the public comment on this project when talking about the minor site plan. As far as what was given to the public, applicant was required to hold a pre-application neighborhood meeting. So that was before an application is even submitted. They were required to hold a pre-application meeting, and that happened in November. So again, that's the plat, and that's its own separate application and its own separate action for recommendation. And then you have, if you find that Planning and Zoning Commission would recommend for denial, you do have to have alternative motions as listed below addressing each specific criteria. And so again, that's the plat application. And then moving on to the minor site plan. And so this is for the actual development, not just the subdivision. Staff recommends approval of the plan with findings and conditions on pages 12 and 13 of the staff report. Actions are similar to that for the plat, and I'll get into some of the conditions in this presentation. So again, an overview, applicant is proposing construction of 2 separate buildings. They are townhomes. The front building has 5 units in it. The rear building also 6, with one of them being an ADA unit. And so you can see the breakdown in units there. As far as location and zoning districts, so the property is zoned, that brown is that residential high density zoning district. So you can see as it goes to the west, it gets into non-residential zoning districts, and then you go more towards downtown with the commercial zoning districts. And so that's where this is located. So here are some photos of the site, looking different directions along Overland, and then also the existing structures. And then here's a site plan with the layout. So again, 5 buildings, 5 units in the front, 6 in the back, with off-street parking in 2 areas. So criteria for your minor site and architectural plan are here, and I'll go through each one individually. So first is consistency with general purpose and intent of the code. And so this property is zoned residential high density, which allows for a mix of housing types from single family to multifamily dwellings, which you do see in this neighborhood. So as far as consistency with the intent of the zoning district, this project meets that. Number two, consistent with dimensional design development and all our standards of the code. So this table pulls out a lot of specific requirements, design requirements from code. And this just shows how different aspects of the project meet the requirements. One of them I will point out that is not currently met by the site plan is common open space. And so common open space is a requirement for this type of development. It is intended to be common open spaces that are used by the residents, or if you had a non-residential property, the users of a development. The requirement is that 20% of the development site be that common open space. And there's a variety of methods that someone can use on a site to meet this requirement. What's really important to point out is that common open space requirements are separate from landscaping. So you do have a percentage of the site that has to be landscaped. Not all landscaping can be common open space. And so there is some instances where an area of the site can go towards the landscaping requirement, but not common open space. And so listed below are some examples of areas that can be used for common open space. And then there's different aspects of a site which cannot be used for common open space. So any area of land, any area with a dimension of less than 15 feet cannot be considered common open space. So like a thin landscaping strip, that would count towards your landscaping count, but not towards common open space. So ultimately, this applicant in their site design is about 450 square feet short of their common open space requirement, which there is an option to do a fee in lieu for that amount, which that has to be approved by city council. So the applicant will be requesting a payment of fee in lieu for that 450 square feet. And that fee in lieu equates to about $2,300. So that is one aspect of the site design. So this is a good image. So it illustrates the green areas are areas that can be counted towards common open space. And you can see how there's other landscaped areas. Mouse can move. So like this area up here, that's landscaped and it goes towards the landscape total, but it can't be counted towards common open space. So not all landscaping can be counted as common open space ultimately. Another aspect of the project, and again, so this is going to be a condition of approval, is meeting the height transition requirement. And so what code requires is that anytime you have a new building that exceeds a neighboring building by 1 story or more, it uses height transition techniques to make it basically transition to a smaller scale building. And so these are the techniques that code requires. You have to have 3 of the 4. And I think you can see an image brought from code. So doing things like stepping down building height, using variations in the sidewall, using a similar roof pitch, or then using dormers and sloping roofs for upper stories. And so this image shows, so on the right, that brown building, that's the neighboring structure, 1 story. And then these 2 images below, this shows that rear building B. And so the drawing would show you facing south. So on the rear, and then the elevation on the right, this would show you facing north. And so it's that far right, this unit right here, where a height transition would be required. So the applicant these are the original drawings. The applicant has been working with staff on proposed revisions to bring a height transition down. And so for example, like on this side of the property, there is a height transition. However, those buildings are taller on that side. So more or less, this is visually kind of what you would see as a height transition stepping down to the scale of a nearby structure. And so that is been placed as a condition of approval for the project. Another aspect of this is sidewalk. Sidewalks are required with new development. There also is an option for a sidewalk fee in lieu that can be paid upon approval by city engineer. And so based on the fact that engineering is looking at doing pedestrian improvements to this area, a sidewalk fee in lieu is preferred, just so that something doesn't get installed that might not match with future plans. Just because in this area, there's very little sidewalk. So if engineering in the future wanted to say, looked at the area and planned to do sidewalk on the other side of the street, and something had been installed here that isn't doesn't promote connectivity. So to have that. So again, that's an aspect of the project. And then also within the site, it is required to have on-site pedestrian connections connecting entrances to buildings to the public right away. And so this area on the back would need some sort of pedestrian walkway. Doesn't necessarily have to be a sidewalk. For instance, code would allow like a different paving material, but it needs to be an area visibly where someone understands that's where a pedestrian will go. And so that's also been placed as a condition of approval. An applicant has been working on adding that into the site plan. Third criteria, consistency with any previously approved plat, PUD, or any other precedent land use approval. So that's not applicable. There's nothing that's been previously approved for this property. 4, consistent with comprehensive plans and other city policies. So this map that you see here, this is from the comprehensive plan, and this is the future land use map. And so this neighborhood in the brown is identified as multifamily residential, which again matches the current zoning of high density residential. And then consistency with comprehensive plan. There are several different action items that are pulled out from the comprehensive plan. Directing growth to areas where existing utilities are there to serve future development. So this is infill housing, provide diversity in housing types. So townhomes provides a different form of a housing type, and then ensure adequate development of workforce housing. This project is required to do affordable units as part of the development. Reviewing agencies. Most particular one I will call out here is Public Works suggested applicant install a fire hydrant in the right of way in front of the development. This is not a requirement, however, it's a suggestion, just given the spacing of fire hydrants in the neighborhood. So public comments, like I said, there was a pre-application meeting held on November 7th. That was attended by four people. 2 official public comments have been received, which were included in the packet. They expressed concern related to compatibility with existing single-family dwellings in the neighborhood, traffic, density, building height, and parking. And then I did have an additional comment with someone today that was calling with questions about it. They didn't submit an official comment. But those are included in your packet. So again, the action item under consideration for this application is again a recommendation to City Council, and staff has recommended Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval with the findings and conditions in the staff report. So again, those are approve the item, approve with conditions, recommend approval with conditions, or recommend denial. And then again, those are the criteria. And if Planning and Zoning Commission finds a recommendation for denial, you would have the alternate motion as seen here. So. And then I guess there also was following up on a question from one of the commissioners. I guess this is time for questions. I can talk about it now, or the
Are you
transmission.
finished with your?
Yes, yeah, sorry.
Okay, thanks, Emery. Okay, so now we'll open this up for questions for Emery from the commission. Okay. Any questions? Which that one is?
I also saw.
Wait. You turn green? There you go.
I had a question about the neighbor's driveway. I had seen on one of the drawings in the packet that they shared a driveway. And I was wondering how that was going to affect the neighbor's driveway. There were some comments about how they were going to keep that in mind.
Sure, I'm gonna go to one of the pictures here. Okay, so this, you see on the top, this is the existing condition, and this is on the east side of the property. And so, I don't know if you can tell, there is a property stake, but right here. Ultimately, there would still be about 12 feet from where this development's property line is to about right here. And so that access for that person would remain. So the dimensions would be about 12 feet remaining on that person's property.
And that's big enough for a driveway?
As it exists, yes. An applicant had indicated possibility on working with the neighbor. I don't know if they could probably speak more if they've had further communications with the neighbor, incorporating it.
For some reason mine's not going green.
Thanks, Emery. Thanks, Peter, or Commissioner Waller. I had a couple questions on the recommendations. I mean, everything was on page 1, but there was some, I didn't see pages 12 and 13 for some reason. I think they just all got labeled page 1. But there was some things about like removal of live trees. And then can you speak to that just a little bit? And then also the compliance with the height transition one more time. Can you just go through that so that I have an understanding of what that would look like? Cause I mean, clearly these are how tall?
Oh, the buildings?
Yes.
The front building is 25 feet tall
Okay.
from top of the building to finished grade,
Right.
and then the rear building is 32.
So, yeah, if you could just speak to those two things, and then it looks like the mounted utility, I guess we just saw some utility in that picture that you showed us. There's gonna be some screening requirements for that. And then just, yeah, if you could just
Sure.
speak to those two.
So first question on tree removal.
Mhm.
Any live tree with a caliper of more than 14 inches does require approval by Community Development Director and Parks Director. So the intent of that is if you can preserve any trees on the property, that's kind of the first go. But then also to evaluating health, location. And then I think a good thing to explain about this property, a lot of those evergreen trees, which are located in the city, are actually located in the city right of way. New development, if we require street trees, don't actually allow evergreen trees in that public right of way. So in that sense, some of those would be non-conforming. So that is an aspect of the application that's approved administratively. And we have requested a plan from the applicant to indicate how many trees on the property are above that 14-inch, which would be then reviewed and approved by the Parks Director and Community Development Director. So that's the tree piece. Then your second question, and I'm going to go back to this slide for the position. So there are 4 in code described ways that someone can meet that height transition.
Mhm.
And so the first is stepping down building height and mass along the shared property line to meet the existing neighboring home along 50% of the new building's length. And so first, if I'll go back to this screen, so if you think about it, this is the wrong elevation. So the building's length, so 50% of that side,
Mhm.
that's where it has to be. And that has to be a minimum dimension of 10 by 10 for that specific number 1. So that's how that one works. And then 2 is providing variations in the side building wall and or roof form so that the new structures have comparable scale to neighboring homes. That's very similar to number 1. However, it does not have the specific dimensions to it. And so essentially, if you did number 1, you'd also be doing 2,
I
basically.
see. That's where I was.
So those are very
confused.
similar. 1 has more of the specific dimensions for it.
Mhm.
3 is utilize a roof pitch and overhang similar to that of a neighboring structure. And so again, that is not as a specific with the dimension, but it does look at, okay, what is the roof pitch and overhang of this structure? And how does that incorporate into whatever transition you're using? So they should match. So for example, on this side of the building, that's a flat roof. So if they were to do the same treatment on this other side, that doesn't match. It's a flat roof versus a gable. So that's what that number 3 speaks to. And then number 4, which really, that would be utilizing dormers and sloping roofs. So for instance, like if this unit had a sloping roof or a dormer, that's what that number 4 would be. And so you need to meet 3 out of the 4. And that kicks in on the east side of the building because that building is 1 story. So you have a difference, that difference in height.
Okay.
So right now, and this is what was originally submitted with the
Okay.
application back in October, And so it's been a condition of approval, and the applicant has been working on solutions for that. So, and they can speak more to it. Looking at creating an area on this that would step down. There's a opportunity to create kind of a covered walkway.
Okay.
With some other amenities. So that's that one. And then you had one other question. Which the last
Just
one.
landscaping and screening,
Yeah.
like what?
So you had mentioned there's a transformer.
Yeah,
So the site had shown that there's a transformer right here. And that's visible from the public right away. And so that would need to be screened with plantings or structure, just so that you wouldn't see the transformer from the public right away.
and I did have one more question on the lighting, but I wanted to go. Oh. Well, I wanted to,
No, please.
no, go for it, go for it. I'm gonna back away from the lighting because I'm gonna leave it up to a different commissioner.
Great, thank you,
Commissioner
Mr.
Calhoun.
Chairman. Thank you, Emery. Appreciate it. Just a couple questions. Do we know when this residential district, or I'm sorry, the zoning district was applied to this area?
So I was looking at that. I think I found a zoning map from 1998 that had it as residential high density. On Davis Drive, there's a number. I mean, that all that section on Davis Drive are multifamily dwellings. So, I mean, at least for sure since I think 1998, and then possibly older.
Okay.
As far as the zoning, I couldn't find older.
Thank you. And then second, the kind of the sidewalk plan, is there anything in the pipeline? I'm just thinking kind of West Glenwood, Red Mountain type stuff. Anything for?
Mostly engineering just identified it at, there aren't any sidewalks on Overland. There are in that White Horse neighborhood. So just looking at trying to figure out, you have a right of way that over the years, there isn't curb and gutter. So engineering's working on figuring out what that could look like.
Okay, so there's a kernel out there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Carolyn? Commissioner Howden?
I guess I had a follow-up question about the height transition. Is there any, well, my understanding of my reading of the code, I guess, is that there's not any mitigating factor for distance from one structure to the next.
It's adjacent, so adjacent properties. So
Yeah,
no,
but
it doesn't specify.
Theoretically, if you had 50 feet or 1,000 feet, it doesn't matter.
The way it reads, yeah, adjacent properties.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Connerton? Commissioner Connerton?
How many multifamily units are there in that neighborhood already?
In total, like as far as like buildings or
Yeah.
total. Well, the next door neighbor to the west, that's a multifamily development. And then Davis Drive, almost all of those are. I didn't go and look at every single one, but it is a mix. Everything, you have, as the zoning district describes, single family up to multifamily, and it does have that spectrum. So like the White Horse area, those are townhomes. And then there's the single family neighborhoods, or single family dwellings too. So
That's
it's
pretty diverse.
Mm.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I've got a couple questions. One I'll ask just to kind of make the point is, I'm familiar with the development that was done on White Horse. In fact, I was involved in it. But we had to do sound transmission assembly construction there when we built that for the railroad. And so could you just talk about that now, as that's part of the code, or?
Sure, and that's a good question. What Commissioner Waller is asking about is sound transmission and how it applies to construction. And so when you have units that are attached, if you've ever lived in an apartment or above someone or below someone, noise travels. So this is a requirement that is found in building code. And so the city is currently on 2021 versions of the building code. Now that's building code, and then with that come additional appendices that a city may adopt. Sound transmission is Appendix AK, which the city has not adopted. And so another example would be, there's an appendix that's all about radon mitigation. And so here in Glenwood, that's been adopted because radon is present. But if you lived in another part of the country where maybe you don't do basements or crawl spaces, you might not adopt that appendix. It might not be as pertinent. So this particular project, this is not an approved appendix. This is not,
It's not part of the code at this
it's not a
time.
requirement. Now, the applicant may, in their interests, make sure to soundproof considering the railroad and neighbors. But this particular requirement, which was on the White Horse project, is not current code.
Okay. Thank you. Another question I'll have is that you talked about the, I guess, engineering looked at the traffic study because there was a note in here that said, based on these flows that were done by, I guess, well, that the study was done by, Chris Hale, or I think is what, of how that was done, and sure is all good, but I just want to make sure that engineering reviewed that, and I see Ryan back there, so I know that. Do you have any comment on that? I mean, I didn't see that in the notes for the agency comments.
Okay, yeah, engineering had looked at it, based on their review, the volumes did not trigger any intersection improvements. The traffic study was done for 11 units, which this property already has 4, so it's a net increase of 7. They went and did the traffic
Right.
study for a full 11. And yeah, engineering had reviewed that.
Yeah, I saw it, read that. Okay, thank you. And then on the lighting study, so the, I guess there wasn't enough, I'll call it light, I'm forgetting what the word is called. Yeah, lumens, on the outer boundaries, so is that something that the applicant's gonna talk about that, or can you talk about that, or is that?
Sure, and we've talked about lighting standards and some other applications. And so again, this is by its zoning district, it's placed in a lighting district, which is lighting district 2. And that district has specific minimums and maximums for parking lot lighting. Right now, they are not meeting the minimum. And so they would, as a condition of approval, would need to add lighting in the parking lot. And that is something that applicant's working on. They might be able to comment more as far as placement or location.
Okay, and all of their lights, I think I saw, were on the building.
Correct.
Were there any? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, I'm good. Any other questions? Okay, I guess we need to hear now from the applicant.
John has a question.
Oh, sorry, John. John,
These are proposed as manufactured units, right?
Applicant had proposed modular units from Fading West, the company in Buena Vista. They could probably speak better to all of that.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify because I believe as such, city building code actually doesn't apply. They're reviewed at the state level by DOLA and the Department of Housing.
Well, so they're factory built, they're not mobile homes.
I know, well, a HUD home is reviewed by a different agency, but in the state of Colorado, I believe the state will review these. So that appendix AK, it matters if the state has adopted it, not the city.
I'll let the applicant speak on if they're HUD homes or not.
I had something else, but it slipped my mind.
Okay, well, comes up.
okay, thank you, John. Any other questions? Okay, would the applicant like to speak? Thank you very much, Emery. So could you state your name and where you reside?
Hi, I'm Ben West. I live in Glenwood.
Roger Gier, I live in Carbondale.
I think you guys got all the info basically on the project, but I've been up there and here before, and I think that We are trying to find niches in Glenwood where we can look for housing stock that is probably in a place where it needs to be updated and focus on infill development. And this is a great opportunity close to downtown to provide some safe new housing for the residents. And, you know, at the high level, it meets all of the code requirements with the exception that we're working through the open space numbers, and we have a solution for that, a couple different proposed solutions. It meets the intent of the comp plan. And so we think it's a really nice project to try and do what Glenwood needs. So we can talk about different parts of the project, like the conditions. You know, we have the open space, the step down, height transition. I think those are the two main things that we're, the lighting, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the lighting's straightforward. We just need to put some parking lot lighting out there. That's easy. We're just working with the lighting supplier to figure out the fixture, and then work with the lighting designer to make sure they put the right numbers in and get the math to work and make it all meet the code. We have proposed, I sent to Emery, but it, you know, we're working up on this stuff still right now, and all that stuff you were looking at was from when the application was submitted like 2 months ago. So we have a step down that we believe meets the 3 of the 4 requirements. And the open space, you know, we basically, if we move the front structure along Overland to the north, we can claim all that as open space. It provides more open space in the front of the units. It smashes the 2 buildings together. So it kind of, what I think makes less of a livable product for people. They're just closer together. So it would be my preference to do the fee in lieu and keep the building as far apart as possible. I mean, we're 400 and I think it's 417.6 square feet short. So it's not an astoundingly high number. And, you know, there's a fee in lieu just for stuff like this is what I understand. So, we could shift this building site and it, you know, it would just really make the buildings a little bit closer together, but then we could gain the open space. So, we came into this knowing that the neighborhood is contentious and the city is contentious, and that everybody has big feelings about housing and how it's built. And the intent is to do it with meeting the code and the comp plan and not asking for anything. So we're happy to answer any questions or chat more about it, but I think mostly we're just excited about the project.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Okay, questions? Has any questions? Okay, Carolyn.
Thanks. Hello, Ben. Thank you for that explanation, and thanks to Emery. I didn't get to say so. I'm seeing some confusing labels on the drawings. Some of the civil plans, it does indicate that the strip between the buildings and Overland Drive is open space. On the dimensions, it seems as though you are just 5 feet from what would be the lot line, which is called out on this drawing as sidewalk. And I understand that some revisions have been made since you turned in this plan set in October. Some of the areas that are being called out as open space do seem to be very, very close to the property line and the adjacent properties. Is that a concern? And are you planning to provide any amenities for the residents?
I mean, the way that I view the open space is that it's a condition of approval. And we're gonna follow the code to make sure that we have the right number. It's pretty confusing.
What is it going to be? What is the open space? Are you going to have recreational?
You know, there's
equipment?
like various different parts of it.
Mhm.
So I think you need to place like some kind of we could either do like a playground or, which I don't know that I really want to take up a big space for a playground, but benches are another thing that you can put. So, you know, I would say that at this point, we're like focused high level on making sure that the metrics of the project work and that we get approved both here and then in front of council, and then we figure out how we're gonna make those meet the open space guidelines. I don't know where we're gonna put benches and if we're gonna.
So you
put
haven't
a playground, but we're
Fleshed
not-
out what,
That's kind of like what I would consider like something that we can flesh out in the whole process here. Like we're gonna make sure, working with Hannah and Emery and Watkins, so we do it right.
Mhm.
But, you know, I can't tell you where the bench is gonna go or where,
It seems as though,
but sorry to interrupt.
Mhm.
We did have like, as of Monday, a revised drawing. So
Okay.
we came in and met with all the departments after everybody reviewed everything and then got all the comments and then made the open space work. And then it came to everyone's attention that we didn't have this sidewalk strip that is actually, I don't need to have a beef with it, but it's not the same way it's calculated at Laurel. But we fit the sidewalk strip that needs to be fit.
Mhm.
And then so we had to revise the open space and landscaping. And so we did that again and gave it to Emery on Tuesday, Monday.
Have you sort of engineered the whole budget for this so that 11 is the number of units you would have to do? It seems like you could meet your open space requirements and gain a few parking spaces were you to reduce the number of units to 10?
I think that in any development, it makes sense to add more. And it's really like, I mean, you'd have a lot of parking if you did 5, but it wouldn't work, you know, and
Mhm.
if the numbers might work at 10, but they're not gonna be as good if, and, you know, like, what I keep going back to is that the comp plan says that we need housing. So like, what's more important here, the common open space or another unit of housing for someone downtown? Like, can we just, if we meet everything, do we need to be talking about taking one away?
Well, I would say open space is equally as important and most of us live here because we appreciate some element of the outdoors and that's why it is in the code.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not denying that, I have yellow in my backyard, but it's residential high density
Mhm.
and
And I think the point is that we have plans to meet the open space, so
Mhm.
with current, the current number of units, we can comply with the open space
Okay.
and the park.
Have you considered adding stipulations to the number of cars that the residents of these units can own or park on the property? And is there any idea what to do with all the excess cars? Like as we know, in a lot of 2-bedroom units, there are at least 2 cars. I might even say that some of the code is directed towards favoring families with children who don't drive as opposed to households that may have roommates, which is actually a very common situation. So what do you do with extra cars?
I think that, you know, we've provided 20 parking spaces and we can assign some of them.
Mhm.
I think that it's a little bit of a difficult situation at this point because we don't know if we're gonna sell or rent. And if we rent, we can make it a stipulation of the lease that they are limited to X number of cars. If we sell, it can be an HOA rule, but you know, HOAs are a whole other thing in their own right. So, I mean, we thought about, I mean, it's certainly a primary concern, and that's what all the public has commented on, is that parking is a big deal, and it's become a mess over there because Davis Drive is too tight, and, I mean, I would offer that, like, maybe the solution is to parallel park on Overland.
I bet all the cars from Davis Drive are already doing that.
They're not allowed, and there's really not space there, I mean, it's all no parking there.
Oh, we have been provided with the map of parking along Overland and and
I mean-
it's confusing. You know, there's areas where there's parking and areas where there's not.
It's super confusing,
Yeah.
and it's a tough situation.
Not well defined at all.
But it's, the goal for us is to work with the code to meet the guideline of the code to make sure that we're achieving what the rule book says for parking.
Mhm.
So,
I had another one, but it's getting away now too. I'll come back to it if I can think of it. Thank you.
of course,
John? Great. Okay, I've got a couple questions. So, and I'll kind of reiterate some things that Carolyn talked at, and I kind of glanced through your HOA bylaws, which I know they're a boilerplate right now. You're just putting them out there to, because you got to do it.
Yep.
So, but I would just kind of, ask, I mean, you can do what you want to do, but would be for example, like maybe it's one family per unit and I would, I've done a few of these myself and it would be interesting, if you said, here's what you throw out for one vehicle per apartment or what, whatever the number is, whatever kind of things are.
Mhm.
But, anyway, that's a comment that I would have. And I agree, people are going to do what they need to do and it gets enforced how it gets enforced. And if you do for sale, which would be awesome if you did for sale, that's a whole nother thing, and then they can change it however they want to change it, but at least you're starting with something, I think,
Yeah.
anyway. So I would toss that out.
Matt did a really good job of reviewing HOA text too. That's what he likes to do at night, apparently.
Oh, so is there another revision? I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of revisions
There will be.
for things that we haven't
For
seen.
sure. Yeah, we'll polish those for sure.
Okay.
They were, like you're saying, they were a boilerplate document and we need to fine tune them for the project.
Okay, yeah. No, I mean, I get it. I know how that goes. So, the next question I have is follow up on John's question earlier is, so are you stick framing or are you,
At this point, we're gonna stick frame.
are you?
Yeah, we were really excited about Fading West, but they are not providing the most confidence for a developer.
I've been down that path too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean,
I think it's
we want, like, it's a really cool idea, right? Like, they're built inside a factory. It's super efficient. It's climate controlled. They can
Yep.
roll them out there and then we'll have housing in a couple months, but it's kind of a crazy structure. They want you to pay all of the money up front with
Yeah.
no guarantee that they're gonna be solvent when the units are delivered.
You gotta stitch them together. I mean, no, I
There's
get it.
crazy turnover there.
There's access issues.
Yeah.
I mean,
no,
you're already up
Yeah,
against
yeah.
the parking and traffic issue there, and
It's down the path.
Yeah,
you can
So-
imagine trying to close that and get a giant crane
Yeah.
in there to set those would be an issue.
someone will do the modular, but I think it's probably honestly a little more suitable for like a stacked condo building. Or apartment building. Where
Right.
you have like one big crane and you can just set these boxes and. This is, I mean, I like the idea, but I think we're gonna,
Okay.
we are.
Well, I think that's good.
Yeah.
So, and again, this, this, you can go by the code, this isn't code, but I'll toss this out here. I'm looking at you, Mr. Jarrett, but would be, maybe doing the STC assemblies. I don't know if you've done them before, but if you're stick framing, it's a simple thing to do with some Z metal and stuff, maybe just on that back building towards the railroad.
Yeah,
tracks.
we're gonna do some sound mitigation to.
Yeah.
Improve
Cool.
improve the interior acoustics and sound
Yeah.
transmission.
Yeah, because and when I look at the landscaping plan, there's not any landscaping. And at first I thought there was maybe some shrubberies or trees between the parking and the railroad right of way, but that's just grass is what it looks like on the landscape.
It
plan.
is, it's mainly stormwater detention,
Yeah.
runoff detention.
In that
so,
back corner, yeah.
There's kind of a limit to what you can plant in that section, so.
Okay.
Mainly grasses.
I would say there's a bunch of trees growing on the railroad right away. They're visually screening, but probably not sound. But I mean, I think our goal is to make it a nice livable product, because
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the end, that's like gonna either sell better or stay rented. So we want people to be there. And so we're gonna make them.
Another question that I had, and it was, I saw Emery kept kind of pretending he was walking up there and then he sat down and then he came up and sat down. But it was on the open space. Does our code say it, is it passive or is it active? Or, I mean, and by that, do they have to have by code benches or a certain amount of stuff or not?
Yeah, so it can be, code reads, recreation, passive or active. So you got something like a bench where someone could sit and enjoy the landscape, you know, active, like a playground, outdoor dining area, and different uses. But the point is like, it's common, it's open, but then it also is.
I mean, they could just leave it open where they could have picnics and do whatever people want to do. It's just an open space. Is that per code?
Yes,
Yeah.
but it is reviewed by staff and it needs to be activated in some sense. So like that sod area, the grass area between the two units, right now, that does need a little more than just being a landscaped area, which the applicant can add. So for instance, on a different application, adding a bench to a large natural area counted as the open space.
Thanks. Commissioner Sippel.
I had a couple things to bring up about the public noticing and public communication. I was reviewing what you outlined at the neighborhood meeting, and it said there are 26 parking spaces, and now we're looking at 20 parking spaces. And on a development this size, how did you get 26 in the first place?
I don't know that that's correct at all. I mean, the plans never said 26.
I'm looking at the verbiage that came from the meeting with all the attendees.
Okay, I mean, all the people that were attended got a site plan if they wanted it. I don't think anybody was misled, there would be 26. But that could have been confusing.
It was Roger's response, 26 spaces including garages. And that, I'm just concerned because I am anticipating that parking will be one of the major issues here. I think it's probably one of the only issues. I mean, the design itself, of course, seems suitable. However, telling the public that there were 26 might have alleviated some of the concerns. And at this point, they might have said, well, that's what it is. Another concern of mine is that many people who live on that road only go to the 8th Street access and don't go out the really odd intersection onto Midland. So some folks who live in the neighborhood might not have seen the public notice about this meeting and may not have had an opportunity to give their comments. So can you address your outreach besides the neighborhood meeting?
I mean, there's a process, as you're aware. You mail everybody within 300 feet, you put something in the Post Independent twice. I mean, that, you know. I mean,
And the site was posted with the
yeah,
date of the
it's
meeting and
currently
everything.
posted. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So, I mean, we follow the rules for public noticing.
okay, yeah, and I did see the list provided there, so that's good. Yeah, I'm just a little nervous that we may have excluded some members who would have something to say, but I guess you did your bit. So we'll leave it at that. And that ends my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thanks, Ben and Roger.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Yes.
Okay, now we're ready to take comments from the public. Looks like we have some people, so could you state your name and your address you live at, and I don't know if someone's, so you have 3 minutes, that's kind of
Yes.
the normal rule.
My name's Lori Chase. I live at 705 Cowden Drive. In fact, I'm a neighbor of Ben West's apartment building that is there already. However, we were not notified at all about this. And I think that this development or any development where they add more units, that the entire neighborhood needs to be notified, because there's a lot more traffic that is going to happen and a lot more pedestrian traffic. We already have problems getting out of Cowden Drive for a couple of reasons. First of all, Overland is really difficult because of the odd angle at which it enters Midland, and it's unsafe as far as any fire hazards go. And then when you exit onto 8th Street, and this was discussed with the Habitat property as well, you can't see very far when you're looking towards town or east on 8th. And some people are speeding, and that makes it especially difficult and dangerous. And, but the parking, I agree. We need to change that 1.5 to a full 2 per, there, that's ridiculous because there are so many roommate situations and they have more than 1.5 cars or sometimes 2 cars. So I'm concerned about that because we've had problems in the neighborhood where people from Overland and Davis have that 1.5 limitation. And they park their cars in their neighbors' yards. I've had people next door to me park in my driveway. Like, what is this all about? Please move. So, and another thing is the speed of the traffic that goes there, goes through that area. As soon as they make that turn from Overland onto Cowden, which is pretty much a right angle, they speed up. And we have a lot of children. And I'd like to see that mitigated either with a speed bump or something, rumble strips. I don't care. All in all, I think this is a great project and I think we do need more housing. So I like the project. I just think we need to address those 2 concerns or 3 concerns, actually, traffic, parking, and that blind spot coming out of Cowden Drive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other public comments?
It's like we might have one online.
What's that?
It looks like we might have one online as well. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
My name is Jim Richmond. I live at 703 Overland Drive, just down the corner from this property. And I think you guys have covered it. I mean, all the issues that I have, you guys have talked about it. She just mentioned it. It's just traffic, and just safety. I mean, kids walking to school and they're walking in the middle of the road. And you're driving down and you're dodging them but I think you guys covered it very well and had some good questions. So I'm not going to go any deeper. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Other public from in the room here before I go online?
Can I speak twice?
No, no, you may not. I guess Gary Vick is online.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Gary Vick. I live at 614 Cowden Avenue. And I thought Emery did a good job on the presentation, as did the applicant. And I do think you covered a number of the issues. But then I heard things like, I believe from the chairman, who apparently wanted better HOA definition. He concluded by saying, well, just do whatever you want. Another commissioner said, as she was referring to the parking, and I'll talk more about parking in a moment, there seems to be some confusion about what parking was originally represented and what exists now. And I heard the phrase, but I guess that's okay. No, it's not okay. It's not okay. The entire neighborhood needs to be notified of this. And if it means another public meeting to give the applicant some more input, then so be it. I'll concentrate on parking, although I do have concerns on common open space, 5-foot strips being considered open space. I don't see any kids playing there. Height variances. The applicant came in and said he's not asking for any variances, but then he kind of said he was, but he's going to meet the code after you give him a high level approval. So I would ask you the question, what are you approving tonight? It seems to me that this should be tabled until the applicant gets the answers to your questions and presents something that does not ask for variances. Now on parking, this entire neighborhood was built when the parking code required at least 2 spaces per unit. Most of it was built. Since then, council has come back and revised that to 1.5, and I believe one of the commissioners astutely stated that that was to try to help a single family, perhaps a small family with children, but it does not anticipate that those children will ever grow up and be 16 and want a car. The idea, in my view, at my property, we have to have 2 spaces per unit plus a guest spot per unit plus snow storage. And we have enough. But my neighbors have a lot of kids and, you know, at some point, they're going to be busting at the seams. The fact of the matter is that regardless of what the code says, your job is to make sure that these approvals meet the neighborhood needs. And after you've come in and removed a lot of the parking on the streets.
Gary,
Due
I'm
to-
just stepping in here. Don't mean to interrupt, but your 3 minutes is up. So if you could.
Okay, well, let me wrap this up then. We need more than 20 spaces for 11 units, and it was unclear to me which of these had garages. And if it's been represented as 26 versus 20, we got to have another public meeting and go back to the drawing board, and you guys got to figure out what it is you're approving. Thank you for the opportunity.
Hey, thank you very much, Gary. Any more comments from the public? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing part of the public meeting. Okay, now this comes back to the commission for if anyone wants to make a motion or move forward. Hello?
Would we make a motion to then discuss
I
additional
think,
conditions?
I think we do we need a motion in order to, I know we've been through this a little bit before.
Yeah, it's our preference is to have a motion on the table,
And then-
and then have commission dialogue over that motion.
Okay, Commissioner Connerton.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion for action item 1, residential minor site and architectural plan. We are a recommending body to the city council for approval of a residential minor site and architectural plan with findings and conditions on page 12 and 13 of the staff report.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Connerton. Commissioner Sipperly.
I guess I'll second it.
Okay, got a motion in a second. Okay, now we can have discussion.
Discussion.
Okay.
Well, I mean, parking obviously is gonna be the biggest thing. I mean, I do appreciate a lot of the comments that were made tonight. Considering, you know, maybe coming up with some, I don't know if we have the ability to do this, but putting in like I don't know if this is something we would put on a developer, a speed bump or something to control maybe speed on the street. Things like that. That's one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to just kind of point out, I know it's obvious, but it is here in the report, is that because this is an 11 unit for potential rental, it's required to have 2 RO units and 2 affordable units, which I really appreciate because we do need that housing. And you know, and it meets the both categories. So anyway, I just want to say that even though it's probably already obvious. And that's it. That's all I have comments for.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Sipperly.
I was a little more leaning towards imposing some additional conditions on either on an approval or maybe even considering a continuation so that we could gather more information from the applicants, like really firm down what the open space is, you know, make sure that the public has enough information in front of them to alleviate their concerns or at least let them be heard. I feel like it's misleading to tell them there's 26 at the meeting and then they think they don't have to come here. So I think that we could consider approval, but I think there are several conditions that are not yet met.
And so what are those again? Let's just go through, list them out.
Complete getting the adequate amount of open space. And most of these, I think, are in the conditions and findings on page 12. But I would like to see what the step down of the roof looks like. It's going to completely change the, you know, the elevations of the building if they make it compliant. And as Gary Vick said, then we don't really know what we're looking at in attempt to improve. They were talking about moving the building farther back from the street. So I don't really have a lot of faith that the civil plans have added that into account. I would like a little more information before I feel comfortable going ahead with it.
Okay. Commissioner Houghton.
I just wanted to add, I'm not sure we can pin this sins of this neighborhood on one development, right? It's a condition that's existing. I guess those are my thoughts when it comes to parking. And then I just wanted to clarify, I guess, with staff, maybe. Our job is, I mean, we're looking at these 4 approval criteria for this, right? That's our, right? I guess our approval criteria are our criteria, but I just want to clarify that, right? That's listed on packet page 11.
Yes, it's those approval criteria and just general conformance with the code. So items like open space are issues that are open for consideration by the commission.
And I would also add on Richards is 2 things: is Planning and Zoning Commission is a recommending body, and then the second piece is City Council would approve or deny the fee in lieu. That is not, so in contrast, like the sidewalk fee in lieu, city engineer reviews and approves that. Common open space fee in lieu, that's a city council. So if you know, again, Planning and Zoning Commission as a recommending body, that is, for instance, a recommendation you could make. Plan fee in lieu. Again, you're not the deciding body. City Council is on all of those things, but it is recommendations. So there is one aspect of it for approval. There's,
I guess one other question or note is that we're not necessarily approving any specific design here. It's a schematic design, but we're certainly not approving variances with this item. I think that needs to be clear as well. Even if it theoretically were approved as represented, we're not approving a variance from any piece of the code.
Do you agree with that?
correct. Yeah, because if it's a condition of approval and the applicant cannot meet it, then it would not be approved.
Okay, thanks, John. Commissioner Connerton.
Yeah, and one other, just like a comment to what Commissioner Sipperly's concerns is, you know, if it says right here on the suggested conditions that we would be, you know, we're sending this to City Council for them to approve, is any future changes, anything that they decide that they're gonna change, it has to comply obviously with the code. And also, it would have to go through several steps. So it's, like he said, I do agree that it's schematic and, we're just saying that it's meeting like the basic of, you know, like code and stuff like that. But, I mean, we can, and if we think that common space is really important, we can make that recommendation to City Council to make that recommendation to the developers. It would cut, like he was saying, it would scrunch it. And also if we were asking for 10 units instead of 11, I think then we'd probably lose an RO unit, wouldn't we? Like a, would you,
That amount would stay the same.
oh, okay. Those are just, I guess I just made a bunch of comments.
That was good. That's fine. That's what this part's for.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks, Amy. Carolyn? Yeah.
I'm just reviewing the findings and conditions that are listed in the staff report to see if the things we were just talking about are in there. And I'm seeing that the owner shall comply with all verbal representations made in the public hearings, which brings me back to the 26 parking spaces. But I'm looking in here to see if complying with open space is a suggested condition, or if they've already discussed $2,300 of fee in lieu, so one of the conditions is not to meet the open space requirement, am I right? At this time, there's one we could add, but I don't believe I see that meeting the open space requirement is a condition.
I think Emery's point earlier is that that is not a planning commission decision.
Mhm.
You could recommend to city council to deny the fee in lieu.
Mhm.
But it was not prepared as a condition here because it's not one of the approval criteria.
Okay.
And it's not a decision that the planning commission would be making, but
Okay.
I think adding that recommendation to a motion is entirely within your jurisdiction.
Okay.
In a follow-up, like what Richard's kind of explained is, so the fee in lieu, that's in code, that's something that an applicant can request of city council. So really I would fall under like number 1, shall comply with requirements of code. So that's already there, it's an option. So having it as a condition, like it's already kind of under meeting code.
Okay.
Up to city council to approve. So, and then also I just wanted to touch on, because it has come up about public noticing. The applicant did meet all the requirements for public noticing. To the members of the public, the distance is 300 feet from the subject property. And anytime you have that dimension, it's going to end somewhere. And people beyond that will not get letters that very much are still part of the neighborhood. And so that's why those persons didn't get letters for the initial pre-application meeting. And then also this one, which the idea too, that's the idea of having it posted in the newspaper and then also on site. But as far as the mailing, those people did not receive letters because they're just outside the 300 feet.
Thanks.
I
Commissioner
have
Conlon?
just a quick question. Just who takes the minute notes for the,
So that's a good question. So the pre-application meeting, that's before someone submits an application to the city. So as far as the process, when you submit, so like this type of application, a residential minor site application, you have to have a pre-application meeting with staff where an applicant comes in, and that can be a varying degree of completeness on an application. Sometimes people have something very conceptual. I want to do a fourplex on this lot, and they might not have even elevations. So that's one part, is pre-application meeting with staff. And then they also have to do a pre-application meeting with the neighborhood. And so there are certainly instances where someone might do a pre-application meeting with staff and neighborhood as required for a certain type of application, and then not submit an application. It just doesn't continue. So that particular, the neighborhood meeting, that is on applicant. They pick the location, they send out the meeting, they compile the notes and add the things. It was included in your packet, the items. And so the minutes do say, the minutes read 26 units. The site plan is what was submitted and has 20. So.
Okay.
No.
Is it?
Richard?
It's up to the chair.
Sure. And the chair is okay.
So, I was present in the meeting. I kind of ran the meeting. We had a visual representation, the same, site plan that you guys are looking at here. We physically counted, it was up on a projection screen. So it's on a big screen. And we physically, the applicant or the people that were there physically stood in front of it, and we counted each space. I don't know how it was transcribed as 26, but we physically counted each space in each garage in front of the people that were there. My feeling is that it's a typo. Somebody looked at a 0 and it looked like a 6 and wrote it as a 6, and I didn't catch it when I edited the document. So.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
Roger.
Yeah.
Okay, Commission, Emery, do you have something you want to say?
Oh, yeah, I think just on the nature of what a pre-application meeting is, there are certainly times when staff, we have a pre-application meeting with someone and they're proposing a certain number of units, and then at time of application, that does change. But, you know, the meeting did capture the intent and with the site plan that matched, so.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks. Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
I should turn my out.
Yeah, so I've been kind of waiting. So, yeah, I guess for me, you know, it's interesting because we go by code, you know, parking is 20 places, you know, and, you know, it'd always be nice if it was more, but that's what the code says. So, an open space, I think you addressed it well from my perspective of how you talked at it, that it is within the one, and then that goes to council and they have to decide what they do, and the applicant has to decide how they go with that as well. And I'm okay for me with not seeing the step down because I trust staff to look at that and to kind of go through that versus go through, you know, understand that. So that was for me. And I guess one thing for me, and I don't know how the HOA goes, if we can make that be a stipulation, but you know, it would be, you know, we kind of talked about, do we do, you know, one vehicle, you know, some number that tries to restrict that in some way, and maybe saying there's only one family per unit kind of thing. And I know that can always change, but at least you go in starting with here's what you have. Typically HOA, I think P and Z's maybe not part of establishing that, or what's the take on that, Richard?
You know, HOAs are generally, you know, I believe are required, but for most multifamily developments, because, you know, there are a number of internal things within these developments that the city does not want to be a part of. So sometimes at the front end, making these recommendations can be helpful. I can say the second one, limitation on multiple unrelated persons within a single dwelling, state legislature has preempted that. So that is not something.
So you cannot litigiously.
Yeah, that is not something that local governments can regulate, is number of unrelated individuals. Regarding vehicles, you know, there's, I guess the actual enforcement of that type of covenant I could find to be difficult, because you're not going to regulate where somebody parks their second vehicle, and you're not, you know, like an HOA is not going to be searching to make sure you don't own another vehicle. Like there are just kind of practical matters to it. The legalities of it, I'd have to research, but it feels pretty onerous for
Yeah.
government to tell you how many vehicles you can
Well, I know
I've
I've been in some from ski areas at different places where you have to have a sticker for, you know, there's not someone else parking in there, and you don't have trailers, you can't have your, you know, all that kind of stuff. I guess
Yeah, I mean,
that's been
I
stuff
think
that I've
regulating
seen.
things like trailer use, like I think that is almost a standard provision in HOA declarations now. Like especially where there's limited amount of parking, you're not allowed to park trailers in the parking lot. There's things like that that are very common.
So with these, you know, and they're just very preliminary HOA documents that we saw. Maybe they've changed, I don't know if they changed, but because that's something we could make recommendations on, that is a recommendation. I know it goes to council that has to approve that, but
Yeah, I'd say go ahead and make recommendations. I can advise you to the best of my knowledge on some of the legalities of any of these. I think things like trailers are a good thing to regulate. I think Mr. West represented that, you know, there would be a parking permit system in place so that, you know, that would be regulated internally and assigned spots. So beyond that, I'm not sure
Okay,
what you're contemplating.
thanks. And then one other question I have on the on the parking is, we didn't talk about snow storage. In that anywhere, so I don't know, I mean, I could imagine where that is in that detention pond area off to the northwest corner, but I don't know, was that in the civils? That was,
Well, I was also gonna follow up too. So code doesn't require a specific amount of snow storage, but we do look at where it's located on the site, and it is.
and I was
discussed
reminded
by
that it
the
was on there, I mean, I didn't hear that in your presentation. But
civil.
I missed that page in my 1700 I was going through.
And, I was just gonna follow up to the applicant. The applicant does have a section in their declarations prohibiting trailers, vehicles over 7 feet in height, inoperable vehicles.
Okay, I guess I
We
missed
do
that.
have that.
Good job, Ben. Okay. And then, where was the snow storage that I missed?
So city does not require a specific amount. It needs to be shown on plans, and we
Yeah.
need to understand where it is, because there is some context if it's close.
Well, Carolyn said it was on the,
Variance
civils.
zone.
It was on the civils.
They mentioned, no, it's not.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments? And so I'll ask one thing is, you know, before we vote on this, motion, are there any, we want to do any amendments on the motion that's out there? We just gonna go with it straight up as is? Everyone good with that? Okay. I guess let's call for the vote.
Action item 1 and action item 2.
Well, this is for action item 1.
Yeah.
Action item 2, we don't have a motion on that yet.
Subdivision.
Okay,
So
okay, I think everyone's in.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, and you know, one thing I just like to toss out there too is that, so comments of all of our discussion that happened here also goes to council. So the things that we talked about, and I know Emery will represent them as well when it goes on to council for approval. So thank you very much, and good luck, Ben and Roger.
We still have
Oh,
action
yeah.
item 2.
Sorry. I was getting ahead of myself. Okay, action item 2. And we go through the same process for action items 2 as we did on action item 1 for the public hearing.
The public hearing was for both items. Because it kind of comes as a package.
Okay,
So both
So-
items have been presented. Public comment was taken on the overall kind of development concept that includes the plat and.
so we just kind of go to a presentation from Emery and then,
I think we are just waiting for a motion. We've had the presentation, we've had,
okay, and it's already out there, so that's whole presentation.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
There were two, Emery's staff report
Cool.
was
I'm
for
good.
both.
Thank you for helping me. Okay, Carolyn?
All right, I move to recommend approval of planning file 3424, minor site and architectural plan with the findings and conditions shown on staff report page 12 and 13. So recommend approval to city council.
Commissioner Connerton?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any questions or?
Just wish it had more space around it, but it's a appropriate building for the
Yeah.
residential high density lot.
Okay. I'll call for the vote.
Motion passes. The motion passes unanimously.
Okay. I think now we're done. And the same comments I said earlier apply. So thanks, Ben and Roger. Yep. Good luck. Okay. Okay, now we're gonna do, is everybody good to continue on here? All good, okay, good. Okay, we're gonna move on to planning file 21-24, RAFTA 1041 review and a location and extent review. And Watkins, you're on.
Good evening, everybody. Is everyone still with us? We appreciate your time and the work you put in for all of this. I know it's a lot. Now I just need to share my screen with you all. Okay. So tonight's next item is RAFTA all the way. And there are two action items. One is a 1041 review for an expanded transit center. And then the second is location and extent review for a new administration building and maintenance building. This is located at 2307 and 2302 Wolfson, which is near the intersection of Midland and Wolfson. In the vicinity, we have a multimodal right-of-way corridor to the north. We have some parkland and open space and trails to the south, and then some vacant land to the east and west. A little bit of history and context here. This is the former home of the Municipal Operations Center, which sits where now there is a large bus barn. There is a heavy RAFTA presence there already. They're making it their headquarters. There's a maintenance facility, a new and expanded fuel and wash. They have some office space there now, and of course they have an existing park and ride there. So we have here a couple of renderings of the proposed administration building on top, and then the proposed transit center on the bottom. Here's an overall site map with some aerial imagery underneath it. It's important to note that there are 3 different parcels here. The first parcel is, and actually where about the number 1 is where the proposed maintenance building is. And then the second parcel is where the proposed administration building is. The third parcel is where the park and ride is. And the zoning here, because there's a couple of zone districts going on, the first parcel is zoned light industrial, and the second and third are both zoned M1, which is mixed use corridor. And then you can also see the intersection of Midland and Wolfson there with the Midland Center commercial development. Here's another site plan that shows, in addition to the proposed building, some of the existing facilities like the maintenance facility and the fuel and wash, the new bus storage. I've got some photos from Wolfson here of the existing facility, existing parking ride and the entrance to some of the other RAFTA facilities that are there now. So this project is a little bit more complex than some of the projects that come before you all, and this is part of the reason. There are some overlapping sets of regulations here that I'm going to try to keep clear for you guys. And I'm also going to try to keep separate during this presentation the 2 action items. So after this slide that I'm going to explain, we're going to be talking about the transit center. I'm going to try to keep that fairly separate from the location and extent part in the maintenance building and the administration building. So what are the rules that govern these 2 applications here? We have section 070080, guidelines and regulations for matters of state interest. Matters of state interest is kind of a synonym for 1041 review. So when you hear me say 1041 review, I kind of prefer saying that because it's a little bit less wordy. It is the same thing. And so there is a specific section of code that was adopted in 2022 or 23 that applies just to the transit center building, not the other part, not the other components. The Glenwood Meadows Annexation and Development Agreement is an agreement that contains a separate set of zoning regulations that governs all of Glenwood Meadows, and these apply only to the transit center. So the transit center parcel is part of Glenwood Meadows. The, I'll call it regular municipal code regulations apply to the administration building and the maintenance building. And then a subset of the municipal code is the sensitive area protection standards. These apply to both of those parcels, and they actually replace some components of the zoning regulations. So the design requirements, for example, is one way in which you'll see the standards are slightly different for these than they would be for other parts of town. So focusing right now then on the transit center, you've got a site plan here. This is a 9-bay transit center building or transit center. You'll see that the 4 bus bays on the Wolfson side, the street side, are all in the right of way, as are some of the other components. And here's a table. I don't expect you all to read this or focus on it closely, but this is just a reproduction of the table that was in your staff report to track compliance with various standards from the code and from Glenwood Meadows. We can refer back to this if you all need it. So what we find is that the transit center does comply with many parts of the code requirements. Height maximums, building design materials are all there. But there are some some components of the plan that need to be reworked a little bit, particularly with landscaping. We need to see the landscaping area increase a bit to meet Glenwood Meadows standards, an increase in the number of shrubs, plantings, increase in the percentage of plantings that are native and drought resistant. We need to see the parking area landscaping come up a little bit, provide areas of landscape islands, and increase the number of street trees. Parking islands and the landscaping of those is another area that needs to be reworked a little bit. In Glenwood Meadows, parking islands are required every 8 parking spaces. You can see this in the, I'll call it the regular part of Glenwood Meadows, but the Target Petco area, you'll see that they're either every 7 or every 9 spaces. Can't actually explain why some of them are 9 spaces, but you'll see it's pretty regular in that part of the meadows where parking islands are found. I have an update here from what was in the code, in the staff report. There's been some discussion of raw water irrigation, which is something that we encourage. Raw water irrigation obviously is a much more efficient and sensible way to do irrigation. We don't need treated water to water our plants. And so in the staff report, there's some discussion about problems that we've had in other parts of Glenwood Meadows running water lines underneath the streets there. We think we have a solution that's acceptable to both of us, which would be to extend the main line of that irrigation once under Wolfson Road, and the city would take ownership of that. So if we can make that happen, then we think we have a solution to providing raw water for irrigation at the transit center. It's also important to note that many of the elements in the transit center are shown in the right of way. And so these are going to require right-of-way encroachment licenses if the site plan is to remain the same. Some of these items include the WeCycle station that's planned, some fences, some retaining walls or portions of retaining walls, paneling for electric charging infrastructure, some of the storm sewer components, and portions of the bus chargers. So 1041 reviews have 19 criteria of approval. And I'm not planning on reading all 19 of them unless you guys would like me to, but I did want to focus on a couple specifically that I bolded. And these were called out in the staff report, such as the project not being subject to significant risk from natural hazards. That's obviously a subject of interest in this area because we know that there are some tricky soils, hydrocompactive soils, and we have included conditions of approval to try to get more information and ensure that there's not risk from these natural hazards. Number 5, the project will not have a significant adverse impact or effect on the capability of local governments affected by the project to provide local infrastructure and services or exceed the capacity of service delivery systems. So as we talked about in the staff report, we do have a bit of concern when it comes to our street infrastructure and electric infrastructure. And to that end, we've suggested some conditions of approval. In the case of streets, we think that there is a need to upgrade the intersection at Midland and Wolfson, and a roundabout is the preferred way to do that. And so we, because this project would bring more traffic to that intersection and be part of what would cause it to need to be upgraded. We're asking for RAFTA to pay a fair share of that. With regards to the electric infrastructure, we know that we need to upgrade some components of our substation and some of our other sundry electrical infrastructure items. I don't have for you today what those specifically are. We are waiting, we're working with our engineers, our consulting engineers with our electric department to determine exactly what those are. And so the condition of approval that's been recommended would kind of remove that part from the land use approval process and simply ask that they pay a fair share of those upgrades once we know what those upgrades are. We, of course, have our public works and engineering folks here with us tonight if you guys want to know more about that, though. The other condition of a criteria of approval I wanted to mention is whether the project will significantly degrade surface water quality. We've included conditions of approval that they give us a bit more detail about their drainage plans to make sure that that's not the case. There's been just a little bit of concern about the designs. I think mostly that stems from lack of detail at this stage, but we just want to make sure that there's not erosion and things like that that would degrade the water quality here. So scrolling through the rest of these, unless you guys would like me to stop. We now come to some specific criteria of approval for key facilities. These are still part of the 1041 regulations. And these are specific to key facilities that are defined as a few things that include rapid or mass transit terminals. So they do apply here. There's only 3 of them, so I'll go ahead and read them to you all. 1, the project will encourage the smooth flow of motorized and non-motorized traffic. 2, that the project will foster the development of such areas in a manner calculated to preserve the smooth flow of such traffic. And 3, the project will preserve desirable existing community patterns. So these bring to mind what we've just discussed with the Wolfson Midland intersection. We do know that there need to be some changes to that intersection to preserve the smooth flow of traffic. So again, we have conditions of approval included to help us with that. We do find that this project meets many of the goals, policies, and actions of the comprehensive plan, including promoting transit-oriented developments, expanding local transit, enhance regional transit to, from, and through Glenwood, support the expansion of green transportation options, plan for transit stations located in all mixed-use neighborhoods by incorporating principles of smart growth, new urbanism, and green building, and concentrate growth in Glenwood Springs in areas that can be served by high-frequency transit. I want to pivot now to the administration building and maintenance building part of this. So we're
I guess I would just ask a question here is that the first part of the project, there was for the 1041, there was a lot of stuff. So I'll just, Richard's just walking back in here, but I would just ask, should we, you have 2 actions, right? One is the 1041, the other's location and extent, and the 1041 is one that we recommend approval, and then it gets approved by city council,
That's correct.
right?
That's
And
correct.
then the other one, we are the approving body for the location and extent that was how I read it.
That is correct.
So I'm almost wondering, do we want to break it up and have our, I hate to have 2 little public things going through it, but this was a big project. This was between these 3 buildings. I don't know if other people would like to break it up in 2, or should we just hear it all at once and just vote on them at the end? I guess I could go either way, but do people care? Do they?
The concerns I have probably apply to both action.
To both of them? Okay, let's go on.
Press on. Okay. So I'm going to give a brief overview of these 2 buildings, this component of location and extent. And then I'm going to go through the suggested findings and suggested conditions for both projects, because I haven't done that yet for the 1041 review. So on the screen, I have a site plan of the administration building, which of course sits on its own parcel. It's an approximately 30,000 square foot administration building. And it would be home to, it would be RAFTA's offices, their headquarters. And here is a site plan. The maintenance building is only about 2,700 square feet. It's kind of tucked away in a corner of the same parcel in which they have their maintenance facility. And like before, this is a table that we can refer back to. This is just copied from the staff report of code compliance. So like with the 1041 review, the administration maintenance building meet many of the criteria. We have, setbacks, bike parking, enclosures for garbage dumpsters, and then some things that need to be worked, like the retaining walls. What's proposed for the maintenance building, or excuse me, for the administration building for that site, is a terraced retaining wall that would reach 11 feet in some places, and so that does exceed what is generally a 6-foot limit. The sensitive area protections do offer a little bit of flexibility up to 8 feet, but obviously that's still exceeded here. So we've suggested a condition of approval to try to bring that down into. There are some landscaping items that need to be brought up to code too, like street trees, percentage of native and drought resistant plantings. The number of perennial plantings needs to be clarified, shrub plantings, and then parking area landscaping. The building height is another area of concern here. The height limit is 40 feet. There's some exceptions here for parapet walls, exceptions for an elevator tower, and exceptions for rooftop mechanical equipment. The proposed height is 48 feet 8 inches, and that's for approximately 30-foot section that is for screening of mechanical equipment. So they do have a little bit of flexibility built in there, but we have included a condition asking that it come down to that 45 feet that would be allowed for screening. Referral comments, and these do kind of apply to both projects, the 1041 and the LNE. Our engineering department has standard conditions regarding drainage. In general, they want more detail to make sure that the drainage plans work. They would like a stamped letter from a geotechnical engineer and some on-site monitoring by representative of the geotechnical engineer during construction, just because we know that those soils are complicated to build on. Public Works has many comments to the plan sets that should be incorporated in the final plans or the building permit. And they request additional information and coordination for drainage, traffic, and electrical plans. The fire department has some requests as well, including to include a fire hydrant in one of the landscape islands adjacent to the administration building, and to incorporate a campus-style fire alarm. So that's something that they would tackle probably at building permit stage. So with the location and extent review, we do find that it meets some of the comprehensive plan goals, policies, and actions, such as serve as a leader in regional transportation and strengthen partnerships to pursue federal funding and regionalize non-federal funding commitments. Continue and strengthen partnerships between federal, state, and municipalities to build a more robust transportation system to serve the region, such as Mustang, Pegasus, and RAFTA. Develop and implement mitigation strategies to reduce the impact of regional growth on traffic congestion on major roads, highways, and residential streets. We find that it meets all of those. Not received any public comments for either of these two actions. So now we're getting into the specifics of our recommendations for the findings and conditions. So the first action is the 1041 review. And there are 19 recommended findings reflecting those 19 criteria of approval. I can read them all to you if you'd like. But if not, I can scan through them. They are as they were shown in the packet. For the recommended conditions of approval, I do have some minor changes to what were included in the packet. I'll just point them out as they come. So condition number 8 that's in the packet is the same here, except that after a discussion we had with the applicants, we felt that it was important to provide a little bit of clarity to condition 8. It says before commencement of construction, what we're trying to capture is commencement of the roundabout construction. So we inserted that word here, and we'd recommend you use this language if you're so inclined in your motion. That's the only change there. And then we wanted to add a standard condition that got left out, which is that the applicant shall comply with and address all referral comments prior to final plan review submission. So those are all the recommended conditions for the 1041. The second action item is consideration of a location extent review. We're recommending approval of that as well, with these 3 findings here that are just as they appear in the packet. And then I have 2 minor changes. They're the same changes to the conditions of approval. It's going to be number 9 here. It's let's see, it should be the same as before commencement of roundabout construction. Just clarification there. And then including the standard condition that the applicant shall comply with and address all city referral comments prior to the issuance of a grading permit or building permit. So that concludes everything I've got for you. I'm happy to take questions y'all have now.
Okay, thank you very much, Watkins. Okay, questions? Commissioner Connerton.
I just have one. Well, maybe 2. I saw that it said in the part, on the first one, on the 1041 review, sidewalk not provided, and it said no. And I was just wondering why.
So what that was meant to say is the sidewalk width was not provided specifically. There is a sidewalk.
Okay.
And it may actually meet code currently. But we wanted just to make sure that there's an 8-foot sidewalk there, which is required by code. It's connections to other commercial areas, connections to residential areas. So we do want that 8-foot sidewalk.
Yep.
Another question I have is on the raw water. I just remember, we had another project over there in the meadows, and that was like totally off the table. No water, on the streets and stuff because of the soil and some of the problems there. And so that's going to be a RAFTA thing, right? Where they'll have to work closely with the city to ensure that Matt isn't having to go and clean up a big sinkhole.
That's right. RAFTA would be doing the work to extend that main line, but then city would take it over. So it would be our responsibility to monitor it and so on.
Okay, and then one more thing, with the roundabout and all that, and I saw there was gonna be bikes and all the stuff in the administration building, but there wasn't like a lot of discussion, and maybe this is not our place about, like, there's gonna be pedestrians, lots of pedestrians. Is there gonna be crosswalks, or like, how's that gonna look so nobody gets run over by a bus?
Sure. Well, I can't provide too much detail about the roundabout because the plans don't exist yet.
Right.
But that is, roundabouts are tricky to design for pedestrians, but we do it and we will do that. We know that pedestrian connections are going to be important there. So there will probably be some spacing concerns, about where the crosswalks are located, and those are all things we'll work out with the design.
Yeah, I mean, like, as you're bringing this to the council, I think that would be like really on everyone's mind, is just pedestrian safety, bicycle safety in that area as everyone tries to get to the bus. And that's it. Thanks.
Commissioner Sipperly.
I also wanted to get a little more information on pedestrian and bike connections. It seems like since this transit center is located at sort of the head of some of our popular bike trails, I could anticipate people will take the bus with their bikes and then try and use the Wolfson trails. So one question of clarification, is this transit center, it's not where it currently is, where the bus tank stops. That's on Midland, right? And this is on Wolfson.
No, it is where the current location is. It's going to be much expanded, but it is the same location.
So I'm looking at the overall plan. The intersection where the roundabout would be then is where like Sopris Lighting and True North Fireplace and Compass Imaging is.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so at least that gets some of the pedestrians away from that roundabout. But that actually helps a lot, because I was concerned about even employees riding the RAFTA bus to work and then, of course, walking across the street there. But there's better visibility, at least on Wolfson, than we would see over there on on Midland. Maybe one of those flashing lights and removing the crosswalk from the roundabout, could be something to consider. And did we need to look at other things besides like more specifics with the landscaping? Were there any reasons why the landscaping wouldn't go ahead and be compliant, sort of like we saw at the other end of Meadows?
That'll be a question for the applicants to answer, I think.
Okay.
I personally don't have too much concern about them being able to meet at least most of them. I think the one that's gonna be trickiest is gonna be street trees on the transit center parcel, because kind of by nature of a transit center, they have a lot of it's like a very wide kind of curb cut, you know, it doesn't have that street frontage. Although some of that area, they have planters included in the transit center that have street trees that'll count toward that. So I think it's possible that they can meet it. They're 9 street trees short. So it's possible.
Maybe they can place them in a different location and get the right number of trees. I'm sure site triangles are going to be an issue there too. with
Absolutely.
Lots of, I mean, there's going to be a lot more cars, probably using Wolfson Road when the apartments are occupied. And,
That's
I,
right.
I think
They're-
any improvements to that intersection by where the old shopping, the Sopris Lighting Shopping Center is are welcome. It's really difficult to get from Wolfson onto Midland there. So I would like to see that improvement as part of this, as this package too. I do appreciate RAFTA providing a sort of like an overall phased plan of what they're intending to do there. We reviewed the really high wall around the bus barn a year or two ago. And it's sort of nice to see the next phase of this coming up. It's a nice looking buildings. Thanks.
Other questions? Okay, I've got, okay. Push your little button there. Yes, Commissioner Connie.
Well, one of the questions I have is, I was told I wasn't allowed to do a drive-by, but by Richard and Hannah. But I'm pretty sure I saw construction going on up there and a lot of new buildings. What are the new buildings up there right now? And how close are they to what this proposal is?
Good question. There is a lot going on up there. So we've got, and I can bring up the site plan if you like, but we've got the maintenance facility, and we've got a very large new bus barn. There was an existing fuel and wash. Here we go. Now if I can share.
Are you talking about the RAFTA building?
Yeah.
Are you talking up on?
There's
the-
are there new RAFTA buildings up there? I guess is my question. And now we're gonna build more raft. There's gonna be more raft. What are the new ones?
1 second here. Let me try to share this.
No, the ones that they just built.
Oh, the bus barn.
The bus barn.
It's big giant.
And then they wash them up there.
Okay. I'm okay with, I don't need to see the picture.
No, he's gonna show you.
Okay.
And this is gonna be the admin.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know what the new ones are gonna be. I just assumed that's what they already built up there, but I wasn't allowed to go
Right.
visit, so I don't know. I'm sure.
I'm struggling to share,
That's
but
okay. I see it on theirs. The second question I have is about the street trees as well. I mean, one of the things that living in Glenwood for a while is that I know that there is a lack of water, as we were talking about, and this is a desert and trees are not inherent to this area. And so I don't know why the code requires that amount of trees when we already know that it's gonna be trouble for using gray water, like all this, getting gray water up there. And is there a way to substitute more native grass, native landscaping than requiring trees when really our community barely can water the trees that we have?
great
Maybe another
question. So our landscaping requirements take that into account very much. We have a standard that 75% of all the new plantings are native and drought resistant. And so those typically need very little water.
Yeah.
After they're established, they need very little or no water. They subsist on what rain we get in the summer, and that usually works once they're established. So that's absolutely a concern. It can be done though. it can be done. We can have trees that make it once they're established. And that the purpose of that regulation is to really kind of make it a more comfortable aesthetic reasons and
Yeah.
for pedestrians that use that area.
What kind of trees don't need to be watered?
Put me on the spot to remember that. We have a lot of Gamble oak in that area, so that's one example. I could be wrong, but I think even some spruce tree varieties we have don't need
They're
irrigation.
coniferous
once they're
trees, don't, but the
established.
deciduous, pretty much.
Yeah. And so I got the fine, well, I had it.
Oh, yeah, we saw it.
We saw you had it, you're not lying.
I was gonna point out what the other facilities are there. But maybe
It's
we
in the
can leave that
cloud.
for our applicant. You're gonna hear from them.
Okay.
And he'll be happy to point out all that's there, that's newly built there because one of those structures is just recently received its certificate of occupancy. So you're right, there's been a lot that's going on there.
And then the last question was about the administrative buildings. You didn't touch on this, but it was in the packet about the exterior light being out of compliance. Was
The
that?
lighting?
Yeah, the lighting.
Yeah.
Was that addressed?
Yes, it's one of the conditions of approval.
Okay.
And these were pretty minor deviations from our standards. To be technical, the limit is, the maximum is 5 or 7 foot candles for parking areas. Don't ask me what exactly that looks like in terms of brightness, but they provide that in photometric plans. And so there are just a few readings that were over 7. And so we asked in both plans. And so we asked them to bring that down. We
Okay.
know this is an area that's highly visible from across the
Mhm.
valley. And so it is important to get right.
And I'm gonna also agree with the Wolfson Midland roundabout. I think right now, just the amount of buses that come out of there, it's kind of a game of Frogger, but more dangerous. And so a roundabout is definitely necessary.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Good job. I've got a couple of questions. So is the GM80A, is that like a PUD? I mean, is that like, I mean, is it, because I've never heard that term before. And
It is similar to a PUD in that it is a separate set of zoning regulations, which is what a PUD is also. It is not technically a PUD. It has city standards, so it has kind of a base zoning, but then an extra layer on top of that. And so when obviously the GMADA, the development agreement, controls, but there are some elements on which it's silent, and lighting's one example. It has a paragraph about lighting and it says shall meet city standards from the municipal code. So it just kind of reverts back to there. You could also think of it as an overlay.
yeah, but so that was all put together when Glenwood Meadows was done 20 plus years ago, and
Yeah.
kind of similar to, it's kind of similar to a PUD, and then that's an overriding.
Right, and so it's an annexation and development agreement, and then appended to the ADA is basically zoning and design standards, because at the time the city code really just didn't have design standards, and so for context, you all have seen some kind of funky variance applications. If you remember, there was a sign variance that came in where we were like, yeah, this is 20-plus-year-old standards in this agreement, and it's really hard to amend this agreement because you have to have everybody, you have to have everybody's agreement to
All
amend
the
it,
owners
so-
within the Glenwood Meadows.
Correct. So that is what the GMADA is. You have, it does come, I think we have applications relating to it probably twice a year at this point. But yes, part of this is in that, within the GMADA.
But that, so like you said, things we've seen like the hotel and, the housing up above, I mean, a lot of, so that's underneath this, and it seems like there's different sections where different code for lighting, for different things that we've seen. So is that all under this GMADA?
Yes, that's correct. It has its own specific zoning, use standards, design criteria, that kind of live outside of the code.
Okay, cool. Okay, that's good enough. Thanks. A question, and this is maybe kind of towards Ryan and Matt, but is the because I agree the roundabout's great and And then the electric, those are two things that I heard that are kind of big deals. So I guess my question is, we continue to build out there, and I don't know, I guess in Glenwood Meadows, there's still some open lots and more stuff. So are we, as you guys are doing the electric and the traffic, is that, was this like the straw that broke the camel's back on, I'll say both of those, the electric and the roundabout?
I would,
That's-
and this might be a better question for Matt to get, but I'll preface it by saying it's perhaps a bit more than a straw.
Yeah, it's exactly, it's a lot, yeah, go ahead, Matt. It's significantly bigger than a straw.
So kind of two questions there. One, electric. We knew that the bus terminals were coming in, the bus parking area that you see is being built and CO'd recently. We didn't quite realize when we built the substation, the impact that the potential that they may want over there. We're thinking a bus charger, car chargers, those kinds of things. Now we're looking at 4 overhead bus chargers, all kinds of car chargers associated with it. So when we actually worked with RAFTA, they were very forthcoming on what they were going to build over there. We had our engineers look at it and said, we may actually increase our peak load by almost 25% to 30% once this facility comes online, if it all turned on at the same time. That's worst case scenario. So we're saying, hey, we built the substation for a certain thing.
Right.
It's to cover what you're talking about when the rest of Meadows builds out and other things in West Glenwood. And it was partially to cover RAFTA, but not to the extent that they're asking for. So I think that they've been very reasonable in these conversations of, what does that look like? Is it another small transformer at the substation? Is it Mitchell Creek being upgraded just slightly?
Right.
Which we know needs to happen anyhow. So it's going to go hand in hand with a few things we need, but we may have to upsize those a little more than we were anticipating to handle the load.
Right.
So that's electric. So when it comes to the traffic, we've been looking at the roundabout in this location for almost a year and a half. We started a while ago, said we need to do something over there. The traffic is getting a little bit too heavy during peak time. The buses can't get out. Obviously, all the dump trucks coming out of BLD and all the other developments have a hard time getting in and out also. So what was the right answer for that location? Was it acceleration lanes? Was it a signal? Is it a roundabout? So basically we came up to the point of it needs to be a double lane roundabout in 2040. But it doesn't make any sense to build a single lane roundabout now and then pay the exact same amount to make it a double in 2040.
Right.
So basically we would upgrade it to a double lane roundabout at the top of the hill for the Midland Center, for Wolfson, for everybody to be able to get in and out of that location quite efficiently and safely, especially with the buses wanting to make a left, or if they're coming up Midland and trying to come into the RAFTA facility.
Yep.
It's much safer for everybody. There's very limited sight distance looking down the hill. Roundabout solves a lot of that because it slows you down. Then you get to see everybody that's coming
Right.
into the roundabout.
Right.
So it's a safer situation. So is RAFTA the thing that kicked it over? No, and yes, at the same time, the background traffic, RAFTA would be adding to it quite a bit. So all we're asking is, hey, kick in a fair percentage associated with whatever that traffic is. They're working on updating their traffic report, probably obviously trying to get that number as low as possible. That's fine. As long as it's realistic, then we can all move forward and kind of work together.
Right. So then how that works on the payment is that a design is done, maybe it's not 100% design, whatever, 50%, whatever percent of the design is done, and then you do some estimates of cost. Here's what would be done, and then they would do their thing, because I think I remember reading that it doesn't have to be completed for RAFTA to do their transportation center, but they're just anting their money up at that time of the best known numbers of what you have.
And I'm sure
at
Ben
that
will have an
time.
opinion on
And
the
then, yeah,
entire
because it's a
conversation when he
big
gets up
deal.
here.
Right, exactly. But
But
it's
is
a
it
big,
needed
big deal
immediately?
to
No.
build it. Yeah.
Does your traffic report suggest some
Right.
lane lengthening
Cool.
that's mediocre at this moment? Yes. Do we feel like it needs to be a larger intersection? Yes, that's why we started
Right.
well before they actually kind of brought this in on what that would look like. We have already budgeted for next year, thanks to 2A and a few other things, to do a full design or complete the design. We've already got the basic layout as where we want it. Now it's where the utility is going to fall. What does the drainage look like? How is the topo going to work out? How's it going to lay out, kind of thing? And we want to complete that in 25. And we've already got 26 budgeted, about $2.5 to $3 million out of street tax. And then we'll start finding grant funds and everything else that we can kind of put together to get it done.
Yeah.
So it's a needed thing. The background traffic was going to kick us there. They kind of expedited that need a little bit with some of the traffic they have coming in. I still don't know what the total build out schedule is. I'm sure Ben will tell you kind of what their thought process is on that. But I think kind of combining everything together and getting it detailed out and finalized would help a lot.
So for this development though, for RAFTA, because I was kind of reading their thing that they're CDOT's helping to fund the whole thing, you know, blah, 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 and sure grants and all that sort of stuff. But to know their cost, you got to give them some idea. It seems like upfront so that they budget to do this project, put X amount of money in, so.
So with the electric, to go back to that one, we're looking at like mid-January, third week of January, we should have an answer to that. That should be a pretty simple answer, and it'll give us our answer on what we need to do Mitchell Creek anyhow. And then when it comes to the roundabout, you're talking a few months in. We're doing the RFP immediately, so on January 1st, we can start that. And like I said, we already have the line work done. It's just progressing it up to like a 30% plan set, which shouldn't take too long to be able to get some numbers. And you know, SGM's done a few roundabouts, Gypsum's done a few roundabouts recently. We have an idea of where this is going to fall. So it's not a total mystery.
Well, yeah, I know Brian presented to us, I don't know, several months ago on the roundabout, on different stuff around the town. I forget if this was one of them that was in there,
We
but I'm
should see
assuming
the
that it
list for
was.
next year. It is ridiculous.
Exactly. Okay,
Alrighty.
that was my question on that. Thank you very much. I think I'm good.
Got one more.
Oh. Commissioner
on.
Sipperly.
How close will the new transit center be to the large new apartment buildings being constructed? Is it like convenient walking distance or is it like a half a mile?
It's about a quarter mile
Quarter mile? That's pretty reasonable to walk down there.
for someone who's able-bodied, I think so.
Yeah. Okay, I think my other questions could probably be better addressed by the applicant.
Any more questions? Thank you very much, Watkins.
Thank you.
Does the applicant like to do their thing? If you could just state your name and where you're from.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ben Ludlow. I'm the Interim Capital Projects Director for the Roaring Fork Transportation Authority. I noticed the previous applicants, when you said where they were from, chose their city, not who they represent. So I'll just say I'm from Glenwood Springs also. I'm going to do a quick overview of the project. Watkins has done a good job explaining what we're moving forward with. Just to remind everyone, we have received a 5339 low and no emission grant from the Federal Transit Administration to fund this project. And we are full steam ahead in design right now. And I don't know how to make it go to the next one. There we go. So let's talk about the site real quick. So you wanted to know the locations of what's going on. If you were look to this location right here, this is the new 60 bus storage building that we actually just had our first pull out this morning at 4 a.m. I was at. It was great. We just received certificate of occupancy on that. It's around 59,000 square feet. On top of that is a just under 10,000 square foot operations center. And there we have dispatch, driver's lounge, things like that. Just familiarizing you with the site. Down below, it's hard to see this little area right here, was added on to the existing GMF. This is the new fuel and wash bay. The existing GMF Glenwood Maintenance Facility is this building right here where we did a phase 2 expansion on that a few years ago. There's already one existing fuel and wash base. Now we have 2. We can process buses twice as fast at that location. So that's kind of the layout. That's all up on the hill. Down on the bottom of the hill right now, we had bus staging during the Grand Avenue Bridge project. There are 2 little job trailers down there that my staff currently reside in, and employee parking. And then here's Wolfson right here. Phase 6A will be our new transit center, which we sometimes refer to. Originally, we were designing this as Ruby Park North. Our idea is to do the same thing we did at Ruby Park with a connection for Mustang. Phase 6B is our administration building, which also has a large meeting space for training Oh my gosh, I went too far. I'm gonna go back. And phase 8, it's not a maintenance building, it's a storage facility for our maintenance department. It's what in our grant applications would be referred to as a zero emission vehicle electric bus maintenance storage. So tires, windshields, all the specific things for electric buses. And if you have noticed recently, we did receive a grant to purchase 10 additional electric buses to bring our fleet up to 18 by 2026. So there you go. There's kind of what's going on with GMF. Let's move along here. So this is the existing site right now as it is for where the transit center is. Again, the sweet little like zoom in now, how the transit center is going to lay out over that site. So we're going to move all of the parking down the hill during the Grand Avenue Bridge project. We were able to secure some funds from CDOT to move soils from this location here where that big parking lot is down to here to kind of have our infrastructure and grading already in place at that location. So it works out well for us. Again, some highlights here. It's a 3,100 square foot building, 9 bus bays. There'll be 9 buses all the way around. Kiss and ride drop off. This was a really good idea. I can't even remember who came up with it, but I keep doing that. There's a lot of folks who come here for bus staying and there's no place to drop anybody off without driving the parking lot. So now we're going to have that. That'll be pretty slick. We're going to do some road improvements to Wolfson, including turn lanes for buses going in and out of the facility. We'll also have new turn lanes going in the access drive up to our GMF and a turn lane into this facility here. One of the recommendations from staff when we did our pre-application was to do underground storage for stormwater detention, which will be kind of in this location here, so we don't have any kind of detention outside. We have right now planned 2 overhead electric bus chargers. We're having a little trouble getting our buses to work with the one we installed at Ruby Park last year. We're wrapping up commissioning on that soon. Our buses don't like to talk to it for some reason. But we'll have all of our new buses corrected to work with these 2 overhead chargers. And then we will plan for 2 additional once we receive grant funding for that. That can happen anytime between next year and 2050. The other cool thing is that we wanted to do is a secure storage. We call it the bike barn right here. It has 20 bicycles. And it'll be like a swipe card access to, or paying for a locker or ski locker, whatever, to lock your bicycle up for the day. And, Watkins had mentioned earlier that we have WeCycle is shown right here in the right of way. We thought it was a really cool spot for it, but we don't want to deal with that anymore. So we're going to move that out of the right of way over here on the platform. There'll be 22 WeCycle station at that location. So that is for phase 6A, which is 1041. The only application for the 1041. Onward we go. So just looking at the architecture of the building, here's your view. If you're kind of standing on Wolfson looking towards the east, bottom left is standing on Wolfson looking towards the west. This would be the Wolfson facing elevation. We've taken elements from our architecture from the BRT stations throughout the valley and added the kind of components to that as you see the stone icon, similar architectural finishes. What's next on the hit parade here? Let's go to phase 6B. Again, this is the RAFT admin and training facility building I briefly touched on. Again, located right here at the end of that existing parking lot. It's almost 31,000 square foot, 3-story building. The parking lot right now is for 105 parking spots. So that includes all staff plus visitor parking. We'll have an outdoor common space in the back, which will be pretty cool. It says bridge access from the MOC. That made me giggle. It should say, the MOC's gone. It should say ROC. I like to call our new facility the ROC, Raft Operations Center. Some people think it sounds like a prison. This will be a really neat facility. We'll have a nice public space that if we want to in the future, we could have raft board meetings at. We have training space. We put all of our staff together that's spread out between Glenwood, Carbondale. I mean, we have 4 offices in Glenwood right now. We have 2 offices in Carbondale and offices in Aspen. And we're trying to get all of us together in one node. A little more efficient. Here are the exterior elevation views of the building. The one at the top left, that rendering is on Wolfson looking towards south. Then the one on the bottom left would be in the parking lot. And you can see the exterior elevations shown there of the building. The final thing is the Phase 8 storage building. Again, that's it's kind of right below the wall, the big old wall that we put up, right? So we had that wall kind of screened with the new building when we did phases, whatever that was, 3, 4, 5, 7. Again, this will be for parts storage only. It's a very simple building. We've kind of mimicked the architecture that we have of our, nicely, is it even shown? It is kind of right here. Oh, come on, mouse. There's a little building, if anyone's ever been up there, you know, Matt and folks have, it's our CNG compressor building for our CNG buses. And so idea was one of Ben's crazy ideas, let's just make it look the same. And so we have this 4-bay building. It looks just like pretty much just like our CNG building. There's nothing special and exciting about this. It is just flat out a storage building for us to put stuff in. I know that our parts department right now, we use Connexes on site, which we like to reduce the kind of trashiness of our site by having this facility. Again, all 3 of these buildings are supported with the RAISE grant. Actually, the RAISE grant's only specific to Phase 6A, which was also, that was the Federal Highway Administration grant that we built 27th Street with. So another portion of that's also, all 3 buildings are supported with a 5339 low, no emission grant from the Federal Transit Administration. There you go, there's that. The other things I kind of wanted to talk about, so there were a few questions that came up, right? And so I wanted to kind of spin through some of these conditions of approval that I have commentary on. One of the things, lighting, and maybe I should step back. The plans that staff have reviewed were submitted in the end of August with supplemental sometime in September. We've continued to move along in our design in this project. We know what we need to do to meet requirements for lighting, for landscaping, for all kinds of stuff. And so we had a long commentary from staff, and you know, it was nice to get that commentary to make sure that we're covering these things, but we've been moving along to address the event. One of the specific things that I'm very touchy about is lighting, because I've had to deal with a lot of complaints about the new facility lighting, and we've gone down the road of providing photometric reports from professional engineers to show that we meet or better the City of Glenwood code at that location, even though it doesn't seem to make a difference to the folks who live across the river. They still feel like it's too bright. Sorry, we're following the rules, we're doing better than we can. And so we were very stringent on this site too. There was a couple places that we didn't exactly meet that in our roughly 30% plans that we're looking at here. So we know that we'll address that. We'll be meeting code or even better than code. Again, our priority here is safety for our employees and for pedestrians and passengers at the facility. It's outdoor lighting. What was the other one to talk about? I wanted to talk about the electrical comment as a condition of approval. I do not think, let's talk specifically for 1041. 1041 conditions of approval, you will move towards city council, right? L&E conditions of approval, you're the final approving body for that. And because it's L&E, we, if so, choose to not follow your conditions of approval. As a jurisdictional member that City of Glenwood Springs is with RAFTA, we try to follow your conditions of approval. We want to satisfy your wants and needs. And so we like to make sure that we do that. Having said that, one of the things that I do not agree with as a condition of approval, even though we have worked well with Matt, is that this project specifically is not the 5 megawatt build out that affects the city electrical department. Currently, as this project is planned and designed, specifically even the 1041, we're well within the requirements and loads that are necessary from the city. What Matt is referring to is our zero emission vehicle 50-year plan, or sorry, 2050 plan build out. And so that is when we feel that it's more appropriate to talk about electrical system upgrades when we actually move forward in electrifying our fleet completely. Right now, we have the only improvements that we're showing in here would be 2 overhead electrical chargers, and I believe 4, what are they called? Level 2 vehicle chargers for both phases. So specifically only, or for all, yeah, for both phases, but specifically only for the 1041, we are the 2 overhead electrical chargers and 2 vehicle chargers, well within the capacity of the existing infrastructure for electrical. The other item, and I brought this to Hannah's attention today, this has to do with the roundabout. I'm not going to argue that we don't need a roundabout there or an improvement. What I am going to point out is that the annexation and development agreement with Glenwood Meadows back in 2002, which was also amended in 2004, specific to parcel A, which is where the West Glenwood Transit Center would be located, kind of falls underneath an exception that we as the owners are not required to participate in any sort of payment towards the roundabout. So this is kind of a weird, fun conversation that we get to talk about how then 1041 then affects that. I know that Hannah was going to have a conversation about that. But one of the things that we have done as part of our traffic impact study that SGM performed back in 2023, we followed the previous staff's recommendation, city engineer and engineering staff, of what they wanted to see. They wanted to see a full build out of our entire campus, of our ideas of what we're going to put there. We were going to put housing down there. We were going to put all kinds of different things. We've now changed what we're going to do. So we're now going to resubmit our traffic impact study specific to only phase 6A that can be conditioned. And then we will have 6B, which is the administration building, and 8A will show that there's zero traffic impacts associated with that. So we will see an update on that. So I'm not in agreement that we should have a condition on specifically the 1041, as it appears that our prior improvement from the annexation and development agreement for the area says that we do not need to participate in that. Having said that, that doesn't mean that city staff can't come to RAPTA staff and ask for participation, as we have done with previous projects, such as the Southbridge project. And so I'm sure that we'll have that conversation later today. I just don't feel it's appropriate to be a condition approval of this project. Some of the ideas, other items that we have discussed were wall height. The wall height on phase 6B, which is again part of the location extent, most of that wall height exceeding the 6 feet, just as we did with our 40-foot wall, is hidden by our building and will not be visible. And the landscaping requirement for street trees, as Watkins pointed out, it's really hard to put street trees where we're going to park buses to load people. That's a difficult situation that, you know, we've done our best to try and make that work. We'll continue to mess with it a little bit, but that's very difficult. In the overarching landscape comments in general from staff, it's I think our team is a little bit confused between what's required by the annexation and development agreement for Glenwood Meadows versus city requirements, because, you know, you have different requirements at both locations, and the most stringent of the two is the one who's supposed to be the requirements. So we have a little bit of overlap for ourselves to clean up, and I think our staff will. Specific to any kind of land use application questions or landscaping or architecture questions, I have on the call this today Jason James from DHM, Louis Wilshire from DHM, and then Alex Jock from SEH. I think I've covered everything that I want to say. I'm open for any questions.
Commissioner Sibley.
Thanks for explaining all those details. I was gonna talk about the trees. I have taken the bus a lot, and I know in the summertime it can be sweltering out there. And also people like to park their cars somewhat in the shade, you know, you might I do feel that the parking lot plantings are very important, and I understand that since there will be some raw water for irrigation, as long as it doesn't compromise like the road surface or the infrastructure, that I think it would be very appropriate to see the landscape islands as suggested in the staff report. I also wanted to know a little bit more about the parking, like for the transit center. How many parking spots are there now and how many are proposed?
Let's go back to the trees. First of all, in that, the parking lot right now, which if I was to share that, but I'll probably mess it up. That's built on mechanically stabilized earth walls, so MSE walls in that location, just as we did before during our phase where we expanded the parking ride. We don't want water introduced to that area. We don't, and just like we've done in other portions of the project up the hill, we don't want to introduce water in there due to the soil condition and providing hydrostatic pressure against the wall. There's just a lot of reasons we don't like to do that. So one of the things that we did do before is we provided a landscape island, but it's got concrete on top of it. So we don't have plantings above our walls. And so that whole area, as we made up a term, we're hydrophobic. We're scared of water due to failures at our existing facility that we spent millions of dollars on to repair. The MOC that had millions of dollars spent on it that we ended up tearing down. We put over $5 million in the ground right now for 732 100-foot deep grout columns to hold up our new building, right? You don't even see it. So we're super sensitive to it. We don't like to introduce irrigation water when we don't have to. And so our request would be that we would not put landscape trees in the parking area and that we could somehow do that somewhere else. Only because, again, we would hate to build that and then have failure in the future.
Right, that's
And
very real possibility.
what was your second?
I was gonna get to the parking, but
Oh, yeah.
has RAFTA considered maybe some other type of shading devices such as installing solar panels over some of the parking? Since it seems as though your projected electrical needs are gonna be considerably higher than they are now.
Well, our projected electrical needs specific to that site right now are really not going to change. Maybe if we do add our two overhead chargers. Specific for waiting on a bus, we have many shade structures shown in the plans. We have covered area for people who wait spread throughout the property, plus waiting inside. Doing solar on that site, if you've been there specifically this time of year.
Oh, it's 11
the sun
o'clock till about
rises
1:30.
at 10 and sets at 2. It's not a real good site for solar.
Yes, true.
And we've explored that. And one of the things from our board is explore, more green construction. One of the things that we originally had an application that we're kind of shoving off to the side right now to maybe explore at a later time is geothermal at that location to help with some of our, because solar is just a bad idea at that location. We just don't have good solar gain for it to work out well.
Yeah, it wouldn't make it worth it. I understand.
Parking counts.
Yes, parking.
I just saw an email on that today. I believe we are 90 out there right now, and we will be at 110 or 114.
So we're really only adding 20 or 25 space.
Correct.
Because I have at times seen the parking lot full. It is commonly understood that you can park there overnight to take the Mustang. Is that a fact?
Yeah, so most recently over the last 2 years, the reason the parking lot's been full is because of our construction. That is employees parking down there, but specifically bus operators.
Okay.
So now if one was to go by in the next, say, week or two, you'll notice the counts will be way back down into the 19-20 range. We started doing a thing in our trailer. We'd mark down how many cars we saw every day and see who could win the highest for the week. And we never really got over 25. We expect for that to increase with some of our plan changes at that location. And yes, for Mustang, you can park there for 24 hours. We have signage at that location that allows you to.
Oh, but only 24 hours.
I don't know beyond that.
Okay.
I'm not in charge of parking control.
Right. we get asked this a lot, like, are you allowed to park there? And I'm like, I think so, I have, and I haven't been
I have
towed.
too.
But you know, people might be planning to take the bus down for the weekend to Denver. I think that'd be probably a pretty common thing
Yeah,
to do.
we'll have, we have designated bus staying parking spots and we'll continue to have designated bus staying parking spots. And I'll have a conversation with staff, my staff, to see specifically what our allowances are for time.
So the designated bus tank spots are out of that 115 or so.
Yes.
Okay,
they're in-
so they have separate signs.
Yes.
What about parking for trailers? I during Grand Ave, I kept thinking it would be great if like construction people could leave their work trucks and or trailers and take their bus back to Rifle and relieve some of that congestion. I think that's why we're trying to make ourselves a transportation hub. I mean, it's a little idealistic. It worked all right during Grand Avenue Bridge construction. And then the ridership seems to have somewhat fallen off, but if you know, there was a work truck pulling a trailer, are there restrictions in the parking about that? And what about overnight camping and homeless? It's gotten sort of a worse problem out there.
Yeah, overnight camping is not allowed on Rafter property. We have the ability to enforce that. Trailer parking, we don't have trailer parking at that location.
Okay.
And we are not planning on to allow that. This is transit user parking for folks who want to not drive
Right.
to Aspen or for work or to go skiing.
Mhm.
It's to pull cars off of I-70 to prevent them from going through Glenwood Springs.
Yeah, great. Will the transit facility indoors be open 24 hours? Will it like close
No,
after the
it'll
last
be,
bus?
it'll be very similar to Ruby Park.
Okay.
Ruby Park closes at 1 AM. I don't know when the last bus gets down here. I think it's
About
around-
3:20.
Yeah, it's around 3:20, but I don't know that we'll have staff there because we won't have anyone leaving the transit center. I think the last bus of Valley's around midnight. I'm not certain what our staffing will be there, but I know it will be staffed probably close to 12 to 18 hours a day.
I would suggest that there be access to restrooms outside the building if the building will be locked when the last bus comes down.
Yeah, we have, currently right now we have exterior restrooms right there and all of our restrooms that we have for public use, we lock out at a certain time due to people who like to move in for the night.
Yep, understood. But I think if you were to come off that bus from Aspen and there wasn't an unlocked restroom, you might have a different concern. But that part of that's just from my experience in riding the bus, and I do appreciate the design of this facility. It's really well thought out, and that'll do it for my question.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. John?
Would there be like service changes as well to bus routes with the completion of this project? For example, most BRTs end at 27th Street right now and don't continue on through town. They continue through town to the West Glenwood Park and Ride.
The plan right now is to have BRT to potentially do that in the future, yes.
Okay, and
It's
then
not specific to the day that we open the facility that we'll have BRT running there, but it allows us the ability to have BRT at that location. We're pursuing a study to do BRT West, and so we could potentially have BRT West at that location, so that would be out to Silt Rifle area in the future. So we're allowing us space for those route changes.
And with the electric buses, currently, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they serve Upper Valley routes like the Castle Maroon route. Is, I guess, the vision that they serve they run the gamut, all the routes could be served by an electric bus? What's, I guess, the intent, or what routes would be served by electric buses that would be charged at Glenwood as a park and ride?
Well, so that's a great question. And I asked that question to my staff and senior staff last week. Hey, what are we doing? We have 18 new buses now. How many are going to run out of the Glenwood facility? How many are going to run out of Aspen facility? And they went, we don't really know yet. Our new facility, the 60 bus storage building we just opened, has charging capacity right now for 4. We have 4 electric chargers that are up and running. We can actually add 4 more heads to it. It doesn't change any kind of infrastructure for us. They're dual headed, so you plug in 2 buses into 1 charger. We only installed one with the idea of expanding in the future if we ever got more buses. Turns out we got more buses, and so I need to go add 4 more heads. But I don't know. You know, our goal is to, maybe ride Glenwood turns into electric because we don't have en route charging anywhere. So it's hard to send a bus all the way down Valley on a route because you're deadheading it and then you have to send it back somewhere without having the charging capacity. So you could potentially maybe charge a bus in Aspen, load it at Ruby Park, drop everybody off in Glenwood and park it for the day in Glenwood because it doesn't really have the ability to go all the way back up Valley based upon the current technology. So shorter routes, which is why we run the Upper Valley routes with our electric buses right now, gives us a potential here in Glenwood to look at shorter routes also. But right now, we're not looking at running buses between Aspen and Glenwood.
And then Watkins made a couple references, I guess. I just want to confirm it that Glenwood Springs would become the headquarters for AFTA. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to that when I was talking about phase 6B,
The
our
admin building.
administrative building. We would like to remove our offices in Carbondale. We have a Blake Street office, we have 27th Street office, we have 23rd Street office, we have Midland office, we have offices all over the place. My office is in a trailer over there. We're trying to get everybody together in one campus. So we have every department represented in one physical location.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Connerton.
Yeah, how many employees is that for the admin building? Just curious. You don't know. It's okay. And how many EV parking spots are you putting at the Park and Ride and at your administration building?
We have rough and planned right now. Again, we're not adding them until potentially we get a grant, but we're going to rough in. So we'll provide the infrastructure so we don't have to dig it all up in the future for 2 right now at the Park and Ride, and then 2 can't remember, it's in the plans, it's at the new admin building. We also have up at our new building we just finished EV rough in for the future. And that's just our plan right now as we're planning for it, right?
So in regards to the grant, and I don't even know if this is, because the whole roundabouts thing that you said and that what Watkins said, and it just is, you guys are on 2 different poles. So does the grant, would it cover any of like that infrastructure with like including the roundabout?
No, not. The grant specific scope is to the buildings and the site work at the buildings as written. So any fund requests from the city would, come from rafted taxpayer money directly out of our general fund.
That was my last question.
Okay, Commissioner Guyman. Okay.
Or
Okay, we'll change to Commissioner Cowan. Okay, she's the button.
Yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, thank you. And thank you to Watkins as well. So this project is fully funded at this point through FTA, is that correct?
Federal Transit Administration 5339 low-no grant. We have Federal Highway Administration raise grant. We have a very small DOLA grant, and then the rest will come from RAFTA General Fund. So yes.
Okay. So it's all there.
Yeah.
Shovel ready to get going as soon as you have approvals in place.
Yeah, our goal here is to get approvals from planning and zoning, then move forward to City Council for 1041 and have this project bid in the spring to start construction.
Great. Yeah, and I guess I anticipated looking forward that if things are going hunky dory for the build out, what's the timeline for getting all 3 of those phases? Right.
If everything works out the way Ben wants it to, we'll be done in 2027.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Guyman.
Yeah. I just had one question. And it's about the community amenities. Are there going to be for the 6A, the 1041? What kind of community amenities are you gonna be providing at that structure?
I was gonna say the whole thing's a community amenity, it's not. Yeah, go ahead. I don't know the answer to that.
It sounds like you're referring to the code requirement from
Uh-huh.
the Meadows agreement. Yeah, it has some minimum amounts of area that are required for amenities, but Ben's actually right. We do think that we can include a lot of the shade structures, a lot of the bench and seating area as an amenity that fulfills that.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Houghton.
One other thing I forgot to ask, what's the square footage of the snow melt on the platform?
Random stats, it's hard for me to remember my kids' birthdays, so, I don't know, maybe Alex, if he could answer that, but I can't tell you off the top.
And that's just a boiler.
Yeah, it'd be a boiler, within our facility right there at the, transit center. Showing we have a boiler room in there, which we could probably match some of our similar ones that we have in other places. Just a hydronic system.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've got a couple questions. So, the 27th Street station is, first up, I mean, this is a great thing, so, I hope we can work it out. But, the 27th Street's a great project. I know, doing the BRT and all that going up Valley, but parking was, a deal, as I'm sure you know well, and I'm not gonna ask about the parking and, it's great that project's all done there, the underpass, that's a wonderful thing as well. But so where I take that back is on the parking, and I think some people asked about parking, but is if it goes as well as projected, is there future space for parking? Cause holy crap, the 27th Street took off, my kids, when they went up to Aspen and that sort of thing, they'd have to find some other place to park. I mean, it was a mess.
Well, there's two things, let's talk about 27th Street, even though it has nothing to do with this. The old CME building, we.
I
own,
heard
right?
that. I didn't want to ask that, but.
That's, when I'm not over in the trailer over here, that's where I hang out, and it's.
So is there gonna be more parking there?
In my dream world, that is going to turn into a 3-story structured parking
See, that's
with retail on the bottom level, right? That's what I want to do. I got to convince my senior leadership of that. So there's that. Over the West Glenwood parking ride, where you look at the actual parking lot itself, we put the underground stormwater detention off into a corner on purpose so that we can turn that in the future. Again, we're when I design stuff, I have a requirement, it's a 70-year life, right? I'm thinking of 70-year life and preventing myself from building something in the future. I don't want to do that. And so our design for that is to allow us to go to structured parking. We could do it in 10 years, we could do it 20 years, we could do it in 5 years if we need to, if the demand shows that. So that's the idea for that parking lot as shown right now, is that it can go into structured parking.
It could go vertical.
In addition, across the street at the admin building, that large parking lot, we're preserving that space for structured parking if we have the demand in the future that we need to have that.
Okay, thanks. And the other thing I'll just kind of throw out, this is one of my own pet things. I'm a lighting guy as well, so I used to do the CMC thing, and so we had lighting in our, you said you're an advanced guy, so you should be all over this. We had motion censored lighting that we did in our large parking lots, and I don't know, so that it ramps down to a lower intensity during, if there's no one there, so it's, it's a light thing and energy savings thing. It's a double whammy. So, and I saw a CMO engineering, I guess that's your electrical engineer that's doing your stuff. So is that something you're looking to do? Because I know that's, it's, your buildings, everything look great, but like you said, people from the other side of town, Glenwood Meadows, and it's not, you guys are a small part of that whole thing, but for going forward, is that something you guys are looking at, or?
We do it everywhere. It's our new facility has it right now.
So you've got the ramped up lighting?
Yeah.
Spot on. Check. Okay, I don't have any other questions. Anyone? Okay, Ben, thanks for your time.
Mr. Chair, if I may, clarification on the application of the annexation development agreement to the traffic circle contribution. The applicant represented that that agreement contains a provision that makes it that they are not required to contribute to the traffic circle. He made staff aware of that only this morning. And we have not had a full opportunity to analyze the impact of that provision within the context of the ADA, which has also been amended 4 separate times. And in, you know, kind of in the context of when that agreement was executed, the city had a traffic impact fee, which it no longer has, and it makes specific reference to traffic impact fees. What we're discussing tonight around the 1041 application is an exaction and a contribution, and is not how we would necessarily characterize a fee. And, you know, this is a different intensity and use than what was really contemplated at the time when the ADA was adopted. So, you know, the applicants made a request to remove the conditions related to contribution to the traffic circle. If that is indeed the request, we would recommend continuance of this item this evening so that we can more fully analyze the ADA and also receive more information from their updated traffic study.
So should we talk about that? So a question I would have on that would be for the 1041, if we, and I'm kind of, maybe we're hopping ahead here, I don't know, but on the 1041, let's say we approved it. I mean, we're just a referral to council. So then there's time for that on the location and extent. That would need, then we would need to go that way because we're the approving body, right? Is that
Right. As I understood it, however, it was to remove it from the 1041. The applicant is free to correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I thought it was on the location and extent too. I think is it on the location and extent too?
It is a condition of approval on both.
Yeah,
yes,
I
sir.
thought it was there too, yeah. So it's in both places.
And I guess I would defer to staff, to Matt and Ryan, who I think worked on those conditions to better understand the likely traffic impacts. I think one of the the separate applications, because one of the issues is that we don't have an updated traffic study right now, and so we're maybe flying a little blind. I don't know, Matt or Ryan, if you wanted to contribute any to this.
Well, honestly, I have a little bit different opinion of a 1041 and an L&E process, and maybe Richard can confirm or deny this a little bit. L&E, you can do whatever you want to on your property. But once it starts affecting outside of the property, why is that actually given a right under an L&E to do that without any implications associated with it? 2, I haven't given a can and will serve letter, so we can handle the electrical thing as we need to, because I just won't hook them up or give them transformers if we don't have the power associated with it. So that's kind of a hand-in-hand thing. And Raft has never been bad to work with. That is correct. If we need something, we generally ask for it. In this particular process, we thought, hey, we need something. We know we're going to need something. We'll just ask for it formally associated with this process and say, hey, let's move forward with it. There's no specific numbers. It's just, hey, we'll move forward in good faith kind of thing. And you guys will share costs on these. So whether it's on an L&E and it makes any difference, that is a Richard question. And whether it's on the 1041 and that makes any difference based on the Glenwood Meadows discussion, I don't know the answer to any of those. We were asking for something because we know that both of these things are going to affect things outside of what we normally would anticipate for traffic and for electric. So we put the provisions in there. And I may have said too much. Richard's not staring at me.
No,
No, I was just so fascinated by what you were saying. But in terms of the traffic impacts from the separate phases and the different applications, is there one application where the impacts accrue more to like the location and extent application as opposed to the 1041?
We had a traffic report that was actually correct and had the right amount of stalls being added. I counted 123 the other day, not 115. Traffic loading, the kiss and go lane, how much of this really gonna be in the building, get rid of the 74 apartment units over there, blah, 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 blah. I could answer that question, but I don't have a traffic report that really depicts what Ben is trying to do as what's the existing conditions, what's 6A, what's 6B, and what's 8. 8's really not gonna have much to trip in and trip out probably in the end of the day. It's the other two things that impact it. But I couldn't answer that question because I don't really have a traffic report that tells me exactly.
So I'm gonna kind of interject. I'm gonna play Richard here a little bit. Should we hold on this discussion till we get through, I don't think anyone's here from the public, but get on to that part, and do we need to put a motion on the floor so we can talk about it ourselves, or do you want,
I think
how
it's
do you want to go?
fine to open the public hearing, but I also think if you would like any further clarification from the applicant, doing so before a motion is put out is probably the better approach.
Yeah, I mean, I had both of those things written down. For me was, I didn't bring them up, but one was the roundabout with you. I mean, because we don't know. We're just, the commissioners here. And then the other was the electric. Those were the two for me that were money things that were talked about, that it sounds like was not clear, at least, and maybe there's something else. I don't know if people heard other things, and I don't know if that's a comment we need to have from Ben now. Is that what you're saying? That, and do we push that off, or how do you want to?
Sorry. I think if there are any additional clarifications you would like for Ben on this conversation and specifically on what his request was, because I think there's maybe a little bit of confusion about what I heard, removing the condition from location and extent and 1041, but I also heard only removing the electrical condition from location and extent. So I guess clarifying precisely what his request is would be helpful.
Okay. So Ben, do you want to? So I guess the one thing, let me just kind of restate it. So both, really the electrical is just really with the 1041. And the roundabout is both with the 1041 and the L&E.
The conditions with both.
Where
So-
the electrical is with the
Yes.
administration building? too?
Yeah, both conditions are in 1041 and L&E.
Okay.
What I was saying is specific for the 1041, based upon the annexation and development agreement with Glenwood Meadows, I feel that having that condition, my interpretation is that condition should not apply based upon the exception that's written in that annexation and development agreement, is what I said. For L&E, again, as we all know with L&E, you can give me any condition or approval you want, and at the end of the day, I don't really have to do it. So it's a conversation that can be had at a different time. What I have said is that we always work to achieve the conditions and follow your rules as part of our location extent, and we will continue to work that way. I just feel that for the 1041, that is not appropriate based upon the Glenwood Meadows annexation development agreement.
And that's your attorney talking with the city attorneys?
No,
And
you
they've
know,
agreed on that, or?
It's just random. And by the way, the Glenwood Meadows annexation and development agreement specifically states that parcel A is to be preserved. They call it the West Transit Center. So since 2002, when that was developed, it has always been identified as a transportation center, and it's probably around page 129 or so of the 1231 appendix page in the land use application. So you'll see it's always been intended to be a transit center. And then specifically, there's an amendment in 2004 that I can send that to you also, Hannah, as a review, that talks about that area not having to follow the agreements of a subdivision if it's going to be used as a transit center. So there's some weird language in there that I randomly ran into yesterday because I was looking for just the section to talk about parcel A being used as a transit center, that I brought to attention, that I want to make sure that when we, as jurisdictional member of RAFTA, team member, coworkers, friends, buddies, but we're doing this right. I don't want to condition something incorrectly and get ourselves in trouble over it and have to redo it. I want to make sure that we're doing it correctly and following what the previous agreements were and that we're not making a mistake.
So then it kind of gets back to what Richard's saying, then do we continue this to get the electrical and the GMADA or whatever the heck it's called resolved on the language for that? So our conditions are correct.
That is my recommendation. If the applicant is going to insist on requesting removal of these conditions, then I'd recommend continuing it. We have not had sufficient amount of time to analyze how the ADA applies here.
Yeah, and for us, all of our guidance really comes from staff on looking at that, and especially when it's complicated like these are, for sure. So with the process of what we're at with this hearing, what do you recommend, Richard?
I would recommend opening public comment and then probably closing public comment quickly thereafter. And I've said my recommendation is continuance to get further information. My understanding is the traffic study will be complete. You said early January 3rd. And so we will have additional information. We will have time to review the ADA as it applies to this law and come up with a position legally and work with RAFT's counsel on resolving some of those things. But at this point, we've had no dialogue with RAFT's counsel about any of this.
Okay.
I would just add, again, I'm focusing specifically on the 1041, not location extent. I would like location extent to be approved with the conditions as written. I'm not arguing that. I'm saying for the 1041.
So
And the traffic impact study, if it doesn't seem to matter on the 1041, if I'm not responsible for, or if RAFT is not responsible for making payment towards the roundabout.
So
It's kind of a weird, this is why we need to, and Hannah kind of alluded to this, that maybe there's a continuance on the 1041 aspect of this.
So could we put like a little asterisk by it that says, let's say we approve the L&E, but there's these conditions, but part of that condition is that both of those need to be answered, and it could be with staff. I'm just speaking out of turn for the commission, but and staff is, legal as well as whomever, to say that, you work out, here's what the GMADA says for the roundabout and for the electric, and, like Matt said, that you can build it, but if he doesn't supply you electric, then that's a whole nother problem. But, does that, anyway, that's kind of to Ben's point, or do we just continue both of them?
I honestly think it's cleaner to continue the entire package.
Okay.
Because having conflicting conditions could complicate things in the future. The applicant has made allusion to location extent. They can just ignore the conditions. That is a whole process to the RAFTA board would have to vote to override those conditions. So I think for the sake of and one more point of clarification, when we talk about Glenwood being a constituent member of RAFTA, this is the city acting in different governmental capacities. As a member of RAFTA, it's in its proprietary capacity, providing services and infrastructure to city residents. Tonight, Planning Commission is acting in a regulatory capacity. And so I like to distinguish that so that in any land use applications, there is no illusion of bias saying, oh, we're a constituent member of RAFTA, and so we should approve this because of that. So I want to make sure that is being clarified. So, but going back to recommendation, it would be to continue the entire package, just so we can resolve the status of these conditions.
Yeah, Commissioner Cowan.
Thank you. I guess just quick snapshot of projected timeline for this review period. It sounds like it may be fairly expeditious with the traffic study forthcoming and the issue being fairly clear and understood as far as what needs to be resolved.
Yes, that, you know, certainly by the next planning commission meeting. So I think we could do the legal analysis of this pretty quickly and hopefully have some conversations with RAFTA's council to resolve any of this. Definitely between now and planning commission.
Thank you.
Commissioner Guyman.
Richard, can you explain why Ben keeps saying that for the LNE, whatever conditions we put on it, you can just ignore them?
So location and extent is it's a creature of state law that we have also put in the code. It basically says for another governmental unit, subdivision of the state, public utility, et cetera, that they have to, all they have to do for these, for their developments, for their land use applications is provide a description of the location and extent of what the development would be. This is in contrast to 1041, which is a very specific environmental and land use regulation, also product of state law, but specific to certain types of infrastructure. So airports, highway interchanges, water pipelines, transmission line that the Planning Commission reviewed earlier this year. And those have much more stringent regulatory standards and approval standards. And as compared to location and extent, which I mentioned, an LNE denial or conditions can be overridden by the applicant's board. So RAFTA's board can look at, if you were to deny this, they could go back and say, we're going to override this. Same thing with conditions. They could vote to override those conditions. 1041, on the other hand, there's not a ton of case law on it, but pretty much those are final decisions. And so not an easier process to overturn a denial or conditions on a 1041 application. So that's where he's coming from with the location and extent. They're saying, if we don't like these conditions, I take it to mean that the RAFTA board would consider overriding those conditions.
If I could just add, and the whole reason I keep pointing out that you're a jurisdictional member is not a bias thing. It's to say that we all along during any reviews that we've done during LNE have followed all your conditions because we're good neighbors. We work together. We participate with you. We know what we need to do. It's not some illusion of bias.
So I'm going to ask one more question. So with all of the conditions that Watkins put up, I mean, we're kind of, and the landscaping, and I agree with all the stuff on the landscaping. Water is a huge deal. We don't want to put, as Carolyn brought up before, we don't want to put trees in the medians because the roads go to hell and all that stuff. But are these the only two? Are these the two conditions that RAFT is
Specifically for
concerned
the
about?
specifically for the 1041, these are the two that have created concern.
The Harding. Okay. Thanks very much, Ben. So we ready to open this for public? Okay. Do you have anything you wanted? You're kind of standing there like you're holding that post up.
Can I ask a random question? So it seems like LNE is not asking to take conditions 8 and 9 off, which is the roundabout and the electric. The electric is very vague. That one's a pretty easy one to work with. It's an outside agreement associated. It's more of the shall contribute to the roundabout. My question would be is if Ben is willing to roll the dice and say, leave those conditions on there. You know, if we do find out that the Glenwood Meadows overrides this situation, then that condition would actually be moot, whether it's written here or not, would it not?
I am not going to,
You're not going to answer that question, I know.
do the, the legal analysis right here.
Sure.
Basically, we just have not had sufficient amount of time to address this. And I would prefer to have
No more
conditions
questions.
that mirror each other,
Okay.
for the entire thing.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Ben, Matt, Watkins, Richard. Okay, so now we'll take comments from the public. Anyone here? Is anyone online? Seeing there's none, we will close the public hearing. So now it comes back to commission to make a motion for continuance or to approve whatever you heard Richard talk about.
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan.
Richard, do you have something?
You want to restate your question?
Commissioner Connerton.
My question was, do we have to make a motion to
And
extend?
my answer was about to be yes. I think you could continue all three in a single motion. Or the.
For all two?
Right, yeah, it's 3 buildings, but.
To-
Yeah, the LNE and the 1041.
I will make a motion to continue the action items from the planning file 21 through 24, RAFTA 1041 review and location and extent review for RAFTA. I said extend, right? I said continuum. Yes.
In order to.
Yes, in order to identify or receive the traffic report. The new traffic report.
I don't think we
And
say that, do we? Do we just say just continue them?
can I just say continue?
I'm fine with just continue. I think the record reflects
Yeah.
the items that need to be
Right.
addressed. We do need to have a date certain. The next meeting would be January 28th, 2025.
To January 20th, 2020. 28th, January 28th, 2025.
Yeah. Good job.
Yeah, second.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second for continuance to January 28th, 2025. All in favor?
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Watkins. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Matt and Ryan. Okay, we're now on to commissioner comments. The agenda. Start with John.
I just wanted to mention, I was a little surprised that in the FEMA permit that was included for the Cowden application, that our FEMA flood map is from 1985. Seems like a lot has changed. I don't know if that is top down, could be bottom up, but, or if we don't want to update it, I don't know. But I was surprised it was as old as it was.
Matt, would you like to comment on this?
You're so lucky to be here.
Attempt to answer that question. 30 seconds. So currently, there is a whole bunch of new floodplain mapping that's being done throughout all of Garfield County. Those maps just haven't been finalized and adopted as of yet. The last time I heard was 2026. Might be before then, might be after then, but there is an entire floodplain review for the entire county being done currently. So it just hasn't been finalized yet. It takes a long time to change those. So that answer that?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great holiday.
Yay, yay. Thanks, John. Greg?
It's like it's one of the good things about 1984 was a historic high water year, so maybe that's a good benchmark.
You need to turn him on.
No, that's not bad. Happy holidays. Thank you.
Okay.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Watkins. That was stressful.
And just a reminder that this will, in the interim, not to talk about the raft application with anybody. It's an open hearing.
Okay, Carolyn?
Welcome, Commissioner. Thank you. That's all. My only question is, I know that, I'm new, so thank you, everybody, for being so kind. I tried to stay as quiet as I could, but I had questions. It's frustrating that, we are stuck with this 1.5 parking spots per unit. Hannah, how do you fix that? I mean, I wouldn't want to make it prohibitive and say 2, but even increasing it, I think people in this town know that that is just unrealistic to say 1.5 per unit.
That's a fun question for 9:13 PM.
Can we take it to city council?
What I
guess
will
is my
say,
question?
is that our parking standards were thoroughly reviewed when we did a complete overhaul of our municipal code, development code update in 2018, where it was changed. And it is actually, it works out to be about 1.7 because it's 1.5 and then guest parking. So 1.5 is not the bottom. But that was thoroughly reviewed and approved at the time that we updated the code. And we've compared our parking standards to other comparable jurisdictions. And it's always a very hard balance between wanting to plan for everyone to have a beautiful parking spot for their car, but also having a community that doesn't look like a 6-lane highway with parking lots everywhere. It is a constant battle. Those discussions are going on in a lot of jurisdictions. And I would say the last time we compared our parking standards, we're actually right at the middle, and we're actually somewhat conservative in the parking that we do require. A lot of places are moving away from parking minimums. We even have a parking maximum. So it's a very large conversation, and that would be a very extensive effort with public engagement and studies and things to actually go back and change at this time. I know that's a long answer and probably not the answer you wanted to hear, but it's very complicated when it comes to parking. A lot of competing interests that you have to weigh, so it's never an easy answer. But 1.5 is what was studied and agreed upon at the last time we updated our code.
Yeah, I just did the quick math. It's like 1.8 for Ben's project.
But with a handicap spot, I don't know. That just kind of,
No.
I mean, you're supposed to have a handicap
There's an
spot, but
ADA
that's
unit.
like a whole
But there's an
spot
ADA
that you
unit.
can't use. Yeah.
There's an ADA unit. in there.
Anyway,
Anyway, sorry, but thank you, everybody. I was
But
really
for, I was gonna add
Push buttons
quickly,
and stuff.
since it's 9:14 now. It's worth keeping in mind that the state legislature did continue or did consider eliminating parking standards, parking minimums entirely for multifamily projects. So that is the larger context of like political context that we're operating in.
Talk to that neighbors. I don't think I've ever heard you say.
but you couldn't help yourself, could you? Neither could Matt. You both were very civil, I thought. You're welcome. I'd like to thank staff. This was a heavy lift. today. So good job Watkins and Emery who's gone. I mean, tough projects. So good job, y'all. And that's my Virginia, coming out. So, no, really, that was good. And, welcome, I agree, welcome. It's glad to see a warm body here. But, and I think what would be good, and I don't know how we do this, but I was kind of talking to Connie about, some sort of training or whatever sort of thing. And I don't know if it's good to do like could be good for all of us. I don't know, maybe in March after you get through your February heavy lift or something.
I think it's training.
Well, I'm just saying like,
Kind of training.
well,
are we
no,
talking
I'm just
about?
saying just a general thing of, well, one is, here's what, this is just a rules and, rules and regulations, but like, she's asking about the parking, just here's kind of what we went through. Richard did a really good training a couple months ago for us. I thought that was really good of here's all of the legality stuff behind what we do and, what kind of body we are.
That is recorded. That's recorded. You could watch it.
Yeah, but I mean,
I think
I
it's
mean,
very similar to our training last week.
Yeah, we did a training.
oh, you
I
just
met
did
with them
one?
for an hour and a half.
Okay.
This does go to like whether if I don't want to volunteer Hannah for more meetings, so maybe I could just do work sessions with you all. But if there are specific topics that you think over time have decided you need additional training on, that could be a good work session subject. So just something to keep in mind. We
Well, I
won't
think-
make any decisions
I
tonight.
think between us, we're all at different places and we change all the time. I know I do because I forget and then whatever. Exactly. So you could help me with that. And then what's the status of the building code doodad thing that I know it's not a doodad thing because you're working your tail off on it. So is your staff. Yeah, that whole rewrite thing. You said it was going to be done in February. You're
Okay,
redoing
that. So it's not.
the massive thing that's 50% of your time. Is
It's
going-
not a building code or a municipal code rewrite at all.
Right,
It's a
right.
new permitting system. So anyone that's ever applied to come to community development for a building permit application, you've probably done it on paper. Well, this system will be an online submittal portal and very transparent, so you can see when you've submitted it, when you've submitted a complete application, which is a challenge that we have with a lot of applications that we receive. They're half complete, they're 30% complete, and then it takes 6 months to actually get a complete application. So there are aspects of this where you can submit online, you see when it's complete, your payment of fees is right there, you see who's working on it and reviewing it, and all of your application requirements are written into that system so that it's very straightforward in helping the applicant to navigate our sometimes very complicated system and helping with some of the feedback and comments that we've gotten. And then also helping staff cut down on communications for incomplete application submittals, things that are missing, things that aren't quite right, lack of payment, continued lack of payment, all the kinds of things that take 6 months sometimes to get back and forth between an applicant. We're really looking forward to this system rolling out. So that is planned to go live at the end of February. Staff is continuing with training to get everyone up to speed on all the things that we had to do to program it, because we had to put in every single planning and building permit type application into this system with all of the requirements. And so that has been the long haul for the last 9 months. Yes. And so we have 2.5 more months, which we're really excited about. So we'll keep you guys updated. We're going to be giving a demonstration to city council so that they can better understand what this is going to look like. And I envision that we're going to do the same thing with you guys, so that you can espouse how awesome it's going to be and hopefully help a lot with applicant frustrations in our processing.
So is there any process stuff with that, or is it just kind of taking the paper system we have and just putting it all automated?
It's automating it all, but then it's also us taking the time to review the processes. One thing that the company we're doing it with really emphasizes is now is the time to make sure that you're doing it even better. And so it's really highlighted a couple things that will also probably lead to some code changes coming your way in the next couple months. And fee changes and things of that nature that once we've taken a deep dive into every single application that we do, there's, bound to have some dust fall off. So it's exciting. We're excited to be getting further along in it, and looking forward to the end of February when we can launch it to the community.
Thanks.
So tell all of your contractor and developer friends.
For compliance.
Good.
For April Fool's Day, we can just fill out a bunch of applications. Send them in.
Okay, and now it's on to director
That'd be
comments.
complete.
So you just started your director comments, so whatever else.
Well, I think you guys know what's now on the docket for January meeting.
Yeah.
There might be another application that comes by, but we don't have any at the moment that are geared up for that. We're kind of waiting on a bunch of stuff that's hanging out there. Other than that, staff's doing great. We're fully staffed. You guys have 2 possible candidates for alternates, which we haven't had in a very long time. So that's exciting. They will be interviewed by City Council on January 2nd for possible placement. And then just wanted to say thank you to Connie for joining us. This was a pretty hefty lift for your first meeting. So great job.
It's been work.
And that's all for me.
Transmission line.
480 down again. Just with
Thanks
the
for
duck.
being here, Matt and Ryan and
Oh, I don't think I introduced Harper. She's a new, she's like blocked by the monitor. So she is a new associate at our firm. She was with us last summer, 2023. So
and
has
you decided to come back, huh? See,
she decided to come back. Harper grew up in Salida, so she gets it. And hope she will be around for a few more meetings before we scare her away.
welcome, Harper. Okay. My drama.
Stuff on Wednesday.
Thought there's gonna be some.